Welcome to the official Lakes International Comic Art Festival podcast. My name's Ian.
And my name's Nikki, bringing you the best in comics and graphic novels and updates from the festival.
Hello, welcome to the Lakes International Comic Art Festival podcast, episode 74. My name is Ian.
And I'm Nikki.
And we're still locked down.
You might be.
In Chinatown.
I'm out there. Out there.
Out where?
That's Sainsbury's.
Oh. I go there once a week.
I go there 4 times a week.
And how are you feeling?
All right.
You sure?
Yeah.
I've been a bit meh.
It's hit you now, isn't it?
I've been struggling.
Yeah.
A little bit.
It's definitely got to you now.
Last week I really struggled at shopping.
You've been terrible. You've come home going, it's cost me hundreds. And you've bought what?
Jack Daniels.
Jack Daniels.
And wine.
Always Jack Daniels wine and half of what we need. And not, I don't know what you've been spending the money on. I think you're just lying and making me send you over the housekeeping money. Yeah, it was £100 and you spent like 50.
That's what I've done. I'm pocketing all this money for when I'm free and I can go to a pub. I'm going to blow it all.
Thinking, blow it all on pints.
On tequilas. And margaritas. Yeah, no, it's been hard. I have struggled a bit. I've made cakes though.
Yeah, I'm quite liking the fact that you found baking. Because, I mean, I'm still going to work and walking 5 miles a day, so I'm all right. I can eat the cakes. The rest of you, we're going to have to knock down a wall to get you and the kids out at this rate.
Yeah, but they're good, aren't they?
Yeah, they are good.
I'm good at baking.
You've done all right.
A great... Whoa, all right.
Oh, come on, you made brownies and a lemon drizzle.
There we go. What more do you
Even
want?
someone's blind granny can make brownies and a lemon drizzle.
Those brownies
They were good brownies. You made a mess. Me and James, it took us ages to tidy up that mess.
I am the chef.
All right,
I am
is
not
that what
the
it
cleaner.
is? Oh, is that too good now to clean, are we?
Uh-huh.
Well, remember that one.
Good. Right, big thank you. In fact, what's going on in the episode will probably be quite good.
It does help,
first
wouldn't
of
it,
all.
when we start thanking people.
First, we've got a chat with Rees Finlay, creator of Reaffirmation.
That was a fun chat.
Yeah, really good fun.
Yeah, he's
Bit
lovely.
of a laugh.
Bit of a laugh.
So that's coming up shortly. Pete and Mike are sharing another extended length Ramshakle Lockdown.
Why are you still letting them do this?
Can't stop them. I can't get anywhere near them.
We can't go near them. We can't poke them with a big stick.
Can't do anything about it.
This is not good. We need to separate them now.
This episode, they're looking at horror versus non-fiction comics and post-apocalyptic versus TV adaptations.
Yes.
That's coming up. And also, Tom is here.
Here? Where is
Tom is here on the show. You didn't let me finish it. He's reviewing Ellerbisms by Marc Ellerby, which is something we looked at a few years ago.
Yes,
So it'd be intriguing to see how he thinks. I really liked.
Yeah, you
Ellerbisms.
really loved it.
Really did like. Even almost shed a tear.
You do, yeah. Was that through your emotional years? Was that where you,
my teenage years?
When you came in contact with your feminine side.
My teenage years of 38 to 39. So long ago. But a big thank you, first of all, to Mr. Richard Sheaf for sending me a stack of Warhammer monthly comics.
It's a proper stack as
It
well,
is
isn't
it? It's like 40-odd comics to read.
Yeah.
Mike's already said he wants them after I've read them, because we are essentially just Warhammer nuts.
You are.
We have problems.
You do.
I'm even trying to get you into it.
I hate you.
Why?
I was totally stroppy after that last game. So
playing Warhammer Underworld's Beast Grave. Let's pick up. Why were you stroppy? Why?
Because you keep winning and you've got a smug face when you do.
But I don't. I wasn't trying to
You
be
don't even
smug.
know your face goes smug, do you?
I wasn't
You're
trying to be smug. I was trying to think, oh, sugar, she's going to be in a mood.
Look at me. I've got all the objectives. And it's like, nah.
You just need to learn how to play, dear.
Nah.
I bet you've not even looked at your cards.
Of course I haven't, because you kept telling me to. So, of course, like a petulant child, I'm not going to look.
That's about bloody right, isn't it? Right, well, let's move on from you.
Should never move on from me.
Let's do a few shout-outs before we talk about the books we're going to talk about, which we've not even mentioned. We'll mention them in a minute. First of all, Nick Prolix has been doing images in sort of blue and white of every NHS worker who's sadly lost their lives on the front line. And they are beautiful.
They are beautiful.
Really nice images. I'm going to put a link on the website to these. Go and check them out, retweet them.
Yes, it's important.
It's important. They've got the hashtags on all of them for the relevant things to see. They just don't seem to be jumping out as much as I'd like them to.
Yeah.
So please, I'm going to ask you to do something completely free.
Mm-hmm.
Just go and retweet his images. Even just do one. If everyone does one, it'll just get the message out there, because these nurses and doctors need PPE.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
And just looking after. Mm. So absolutely important. Another thing I can't remember if we mentioned it last time was Rachel Smith's Quarantine Comics.
Yes.
Daily comics.
Yep.
Go and check them out. I'll stick a link in there. Yep. Little Heroes Charity.
Yep.
Need pennies.
They do need pennies.
So if you've got any pennies spare, or if you want to go and buy a comic from the website, anything at all.
Just to help them so they can keep putting out the kits.
Keep putting out the kids. They're selling kids now.
Oh my God. Putting out the kits to kids in hospital, which is very important. There's going to be loads of kids in hospital at the moment as well. So,
exactly. Yeah. Well, probably not, because it's not affecting them, but there is going to be less time to be able to spend at spells. The nurses are needed at other areas, so these sort of kits are important.
Keep them occupied.
Yeah.
Stop pressing the bell.
So...
it's only because I used to press the bell when I got bored when I was in hospital, because I was in hospital quite a bit when I was a kid.
You were one of them.
They'd be like, I'm bored. And the nurses got me to move the wards around and the beds around in the end, because I was obviously so annoying.
Nothing changes. Can you also check out the hashtag Creators for Comics hashtag on Twitter? I'll put another link in there. This is artists selling their work for charity. Again, to help the coronavirus. Why are you pulling such a face?
Sorry.
It's like you were burping and yawning at the same time.
No, I was trying to keep in a yawn because I was up at 3 this morning. It's not because... now you make me sound like I'm horrible.
If anybody wants to bid on Jeff Lemire's work for me, personally, then I'll happily accept it.
You're not having it. I told you, we're not using any of the savings. It's not happening.
So...
No, it is gorgeous. I agree, but you're not having it.
But... yeah, check out that hashtag and you can bid on these pieces of work by a range of artists around the world. And I also put in a link to Richard Chief's Boys Adventure Comics blog, where he looks at comics, essentially just a wide range of comics and covers and so forth, on the website as well, so everyone ever knows. But yeah, anything you can do to help, even if it is just, like I say, retweeting Nick Prolix's work, then go and do it.
Do it.
Do it now.
Do it. Just do it. We want to do that for ages.
We've got a couple of books to look at. Have you found it hard to concentrate?
No,
on stuff like that.
No, because it's books and I like books.
Okay.
I must admit, what I have found is that it's far too noisy in the house for me to go, I'll just spend a couple of hours painting.
Well, that's not by me.
Yeah, no, it is. It's weird. It's because I don't really want to be away from you lot.
Well, that's your own fault.
You're a pain. Actually, now I feel like I want to be away from you. No, and I just feel, because the world's such a weird place, I think I'm using you all as a comfort blanket. And
I wonder why I'm laying on top of you.
That's all I do. I am sitting here and I'm draping myself here. And I think I don't want to be... It's weird. I just don't want to be out the room of you. If you weren't here, I'd have dragged the kids downstairs and I'd have to have kept me company. So I suppose that's where it's...
I'm still not noisy.
Yeah, but I know you're there.
I'm not stopping you reading. No, let's be honest.
No, reading's fine.
Whoa. Yeah, let's be honest.
Yes, dear.
You choose not to read to play Animal Crossing.
No, I choose to do both. No, I meant art. I can't get myself in the right headspace to sit down and do a load of art. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm saying. I don't want to be away from you lot, because I can lose a few hours doing art, but I don't want to be away. It's odd.
Okay.
I'd say that's how it's affecting me that way.
Okay.
I just want to be around the people I love.
Whereas I just can't concentrate. I can't get my head into...
You can't do it at the minute. No.
I've got an idea I want to do and I can't do it.
Yeah, you have, haven't you? And that's not coming. I think it is just this, like I say, Rees said it, didn't he, in his interview? We're on the brink of a huge mental health epidemic. Mm-hmm. And I think, even the most, let's be honest, you're quite... Yeah, you're quite...
What? Mental. What are you trying to say?
No, the opposite to that. You're like a stone. Nothing really affects you in that way. So for you to have problems mentally, but for you to have problems mentally, you're quite a strong mental person. So that's what I meant. Like a stone. So that if you're feeling that, then the world is a weird place right now.
I'm like
it was actually a compliment.
like a jagged shark rock.
Yeah, not even a rock, was it? It was a pebble.
I'm a pebble on the beach, just washed up, ignored. People pick up and just throw.
You might be a skinny
Or they pick up and
pebble.
throw back down because they want something interesting.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say you were an uninteresting pebble,
I'm
love.
trying to think a fish goes, picks up and just spits out once it's got the poop off all around it.
Thanks for that.
That's what I am.
Just add in the extra bit there.
Yes. Poop-stained stone.
Oh.
Should we move on?
Yes, I think you should. Really.
Anyway, yeah. So I've been struggling to read. I'll be honest. I just can't concentrate.
You can't read.
I can't read. That's why I read your comics.
Oh, to the heart. That's because they're all inclusive.
Actually, Moon is now on Comic House.
Oh, yeah.
Go read.
Oh, this is so professional today. Yes, it is. And thank you.
And I'm completely jumping left, right, and centre. The Comic House Comic Club is this week looking at Reaffirmation by Rees Finlay, who we talked to very shortly. So please go and check that out. Yes. It's all seems to be centred on the Awesome Comics Facebook group. Yeah. So jump on there. Right. So let's do these reviews then that I'm struggling reading.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've got two to do today. Two to do today. We've got Bluebeard, a feminist fairy tale by Metaphrog, who are lovely people.
They are really good.
Do you want to read the back? Give us a blurb.
Eve spends an idyllic childhood of long summer days with her sweetheart Tom, and together they dream of exploring the world. But that dream is soon shattered as she comes of age. The mysterious Bluebeard is looking for a new bride and has his sights set on Eve. A rumour has it that his former wives have all disappeared. What will Eve find in the castle beyond the enchanted forest? A forbidden chamber, a golden key, and the most terrifying secret take on a new life in this gothic graphic novel.
So this is based on the story of Bluebeard, which I didn't actually know, I'll be honest.
You didn't know there was an actual pirate called Bluebeard?
Well, no, I knew of the character, the Bluebeard. But
the
Bluebeard. But I didn't know the story.
Yeah.
The fairy tale as such that was behind it. Did you?
No.
No, exactly.
You go. Why did you ask? I was sounding intelligent there for a moment.
So this one's going to be out on the 5th of May, and it follows that story. Now, the thing that I questioned you about as well is I didn't understand the feminist side of this, which I looked into very briefly. And I think you've got to understand the original story to understand what they've changed to make this more forward-thinking for females. Yeah. So it's all about the heroine Eve. In this, she's more wanting a life for herself, not wanting to be told what to do. Yeah. Unfortunately, even though in the story that's what happens. But that's not what she wants. She desires this life to go away with her friends, to travel the world, to get on with things. So that's where the feminist side comes into it in a change. But I think you've got to understand the original story to know the difference. So with Metaphrog, their artwork is just so bright and beautiful. Really jumps out.
It's so different.
Especially, you can imagine a kid reading this. Their eyes are just going to be drawn to the colours, the brightness, but also the way it changes when the darkness creeps in and the dark tone starts to build within the story. Essentially, it is, as you said, it's Eve lives at the bottom of a hill by a dark, deep forest. Oh, it's a dark, deep forest.
It has to be. It has to be a dark, deep forest.
And in the castle up there is good old Bluebeard. And supposedly there's mythologies where his wives disappear. He's had numerous wives. Some say Tiger King, but they don't disappear. That's Carol Baskin. But anyway, how did I fit that into that? That's amazing.
I don't know.
Watch Tiger King. Why are you shaking your head at me?
Yeah.
Where was I? Oh, yeah, the story. Bluebeard's up on the hill in the castle. Stop looking at me like that. So Bluebeard has seen Eve through various means and ways.
Oh, hello.
And decides that she is to be his wife.
Number
whatever. And so the story follows on from how she gets to that point, and then when she's there at the castle with Bluebeard, what goes on from there. So yeah, I think this is a perfect kit book, especially for these times, for you to sit and read with your kids. Comic, picture book, I don't know what you want to call it, doesn't really matter. It is just ideal for those kids to sit and read themselves, or whether to sit and read with them. And the pictures, to say, are what Metaphrog's real strong point are.
Yeah.
And they are bright, colourful, and perfect for the book. So yeah, coming out shortly, it'll be in hardback. We've got a nice softback one, but we're in the hardback books as they do.
Oh, they're beautiful.
And if you're a fan of Metaphrog's work, this will fit in perfectly with your collection. So what have you been reading?
Nothing.
You're not organised, are you?
Oh, now. Won't even talk about the editing you've just been doing.
So this is Dunce, Brego Early Dog Years by Jens K Styve. Coming out on Kickstarter soon.
That was a nervous giggle of someone who just turned the iPad on and went, "Oh, it's not there."
I'll just give us a brief overview.
I'll give you something. There's a reason they call it man's best friend. It's because it is. Brego came to our house in June 2015, long before I was doing any Dunce strips at all. Still, what I did at the time was filling my sketchbooks with diary comics. Many of these have later come to use. Luckily, I documented the early days of Brego life. Those diary pages eventually turned into the sequence that fills the first third of this scene. After introducing Brego, I quickly learned that he was a great fit with my strip. He moved in with a more or less full universe of his own. I find it refreshing to get his dog-eye views on whatever's going on, often for comic effect, but just as often for his clear, dog-angled wisdom.
Okay. Tell us about that then.
Oh, it's brilliant. I do like Dunce comics. I just read them. Half your brain just flies off because it's completely mental, and the other half agrees. Mm-hmm. So with these ones, Brego's got a voice, his dog's got a voice, and that's fantastic, and it's quite sarcastic. And it's basically what all dogs are going to say. Like, you know, when his son throws a stick and he goes, "So that's the stick throwing." You would expect the dog to do that.
You're just giving the dog the voice now, is that it? Yeah. If this is animated adventures, then this is it.
It's going to sound like a home counties woman. And also, you know, him trying to get him to sit, and he's just not going to do that, and then they're sitting on a bench together. It just makes me chuckle. He's got that Garfield type thing where you're reading a strip and you're just going to laugh out loud at some of them, and that's what he's got, and that's what I love, and that's what we need now.
Is it all 4 panels? I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Or sometimes 6. I can't think now.
I can't think of.
I'm going to check.
You check.
Because he has his way. Oh, no, it's sometimes 3 and 4. Generally no more than that. But yeah, there's always a short.
Yeah.
But the story on this, like his previous ones, they sometimes continue.
Yes,
for a couple of different pages, don't they?
Yeah, but and I love his style, and I resonate with the characters, and I just love it. And I think if you want a little chuckle, which we all need right now, then it's on Kickstarter, isn't it?
It's coming on Kickstarter. Not quite there yet.
Oh, it's coming on Kickstarter. Soon. So it's definitely worth a backing, because, I mean, if you like his other work as well, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and if there's an option to grab his full collection if you've not got any.
Oh, they're brilliant. And like I say, they're going to cheer you up.
Yeah, they are just... They're those toilet humour comics I like to... Toilet comics. Sit on the toilet and you can flick through a few pages.
As I call them, like the Garfield-like comics.
Same thing. Sit on a toilet with Garfield book.
Oh, it's
a few pages at a time.
Yeah, if you just had a bad day, you pick up, flick through, find one that just makes you chuckle. And, you know, life's a bit better, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And I might be wrong here, but I saw on his Twitter account that he's doing some drawing, which maybe some backers get actual drawings from him, which...
he's such a lovely guy.
He is. He was very friendly. Met a couple of years ago now, wasn't it?
Yes,
at the Lakes. But yeah, lovely guy.
Yeah.
So do go and check that out. Okay, right. Let's let other people do the talking that are far more interesting than us.
Never.
And I hope you enjoy our chat with Rees Finlay.
Hello everyone, this is Tom from That Comic Smell, bringing you Small Pressed, the Small Press review section of the Comic Art Festival podcast. Hope you're all well, staying safe, staying healthy, and reading a load of comics. Now usually when I review something on here, I tend to just sit with the book in front of me and I'll sit and talk about it. I'll maybe take some notes at best, but I really like to just sit and just talk about the comic as it is in front of me. But I started writing notes about this after I'd just read it, and I kind of got a bit carried away and ended up basically writing an entire review. So I'm just going to read it out almost verbatim and just kind of interject in between there as well. So if this sounds a wee bit different, a wee bit more formulaic than I have actually previously written it down, I thought I'd just let you know at the top. Now, this one is a bit different in that it probably could be classed as small press in a way, but it comes from quite a popular artist and writer and creator, Marc Ellerby, and it is Marc Ellerby's sporadic diary comic Ellerbisms, printed under his Great Beast label, which I don't think is anymore. I think it closed, him and Adam Cadwell closed it in 2019. Now, I've been reading a lot of slice of life stuff just now, and I'd had this sitting on my shelf since I picked it up from Mark in Dunfermline. I found it to be very emotional. I think it's really, really funny. It's nice and sleek. It's got confident lines, great illustrative style, very much that kind of the illusion of simplistic design at a glance, but actually rather detailed up close. Ellerbisms is Mark's diary comic that's detailing a rough 3-year period in which he, the creator, details his day-to-day comics creation, work, relationship, life through diary comics. There's laughs, tears, growth, changes, and loads of comics. There is a large difference in style between ones done at the time and ones done later, showing the amount of progress made. Although great throughout, you can see how much doing these strips and other work in between has made Mark's work really come along leaps and bounds. You slowly watch his style grow and evolve, much like his writing does, and certainly his characters do as well as it goes along. There's a bit in the last few pages where it shows himself and the person he was in the relationship with, the two kind of main protagonists of the piece, him and Anna, who the book is actually dedicated to as well. And there's a bit in the last few pages that shows what they were like at the start and the sort of difference between them then and now, and it is unbelievable. If you read it in a oneer like I did, it really does capture the passage of time really well. I mean, you see it when you see those characters and when you see the stark difference. It's almost like you're transported back as well in that amount of time, and you're seeing kind of almost what he saw in a way, which is really good. It's a really nice way of depicting it, and he gets that message across really well as well. He has a sort of unique style. Like I say, he's got that kind of simplistic design at a glance, but it's much more detailed up close. The amount of detail that he's got isn't just in subtle facial features or in the hair or anything that changes over time as well. It's in like the clothing and the background as well. Things that cartoonists could get away with, and he could have gotten away with also, yet gives his work more of his own personality. It's really interesting. It's really nice to see. It's nice to see somebody adapting their style kind of almost right in front of you throughout these pages. And from what I was led to believe in his webcomic, because it started off as a webcomic. You know what, it was something about this whole comic. I really thoroughly enjoyed it, but there was just something about his character was really, really not sitting right with me in the slightest. I just kept being put off by it and more, and was kind of going, oh, it's just, there's something a bit, and I know what it is. It's because I see a lot of past aspects of myself in Mark's character that I really didn't like about myself in my early 20s, much like Mark is in the piece as well. So really, he does a great job of capturing the unsure, timid and shy, yet strangely contradictory, cocky, big-headed and loud aspects of being a young man in the UK in their 20s trying to figure out life whilst in a serious relationship and trying to make some sort of name for himself in a creative field whilst also working a usual 9 to 5. It just rings way too true. And let's be honest, there is a lot of folks out there doing just that, doing exactly the same thing. So it would resonate very much with a lot of folks. I do feel Mark has slightly more of an edge in this though, as he keeps you sort of laughing at like the mundane aspects of the day, or just gets genuine jokes in there, whether with his friends or with his girlfriends or his inner thoughts. Where there is a laugh to be had, he will find it, which is really great. But it makes the heavier moments all that more affecting and a real gut punch as well. So when he gets into his life and the way things are going throughout different aspects, he just sort of builds you up, getting you safe, and you're feeling like nothing's really going to happen, and then he'll just gut punch you. There is something in the writing though that kind of bugs me, is that some of his abbreviations he uses, it kind of does my head in a wee bit. But that's just a total personal preference. Like he spells docs, as in doctor, as DOX instead of DOCKS, which I would have done, but that's, like I say, or DOCS, but that's just a total nitpick situation. Otherwise, I really do enjoy his writing. There's also a couple of gay jokes that seem rather misplaced, although that may be something that dates it for an otherwise sort of timeless piece. The occasional Smiths reference or band t-shirt maybe dates it as well, but that's it. It does cover the period of sort of 2007 to 2010 as well, and they are all time stamped at the very top in like this, you know, when you take a book out from the library, that kind of stamp at the very top corner, top right hand corner. He's got it for each date. It maybe even just goes to show that in that short space of time, and in this sort of 10 or so years since then, we've actually come a long way. And even Mark himself will probably admit the same. But that's, I think aside from that, if you hadn't looked at the dates, you wouldn't have really been able to guess when this was done, to be honest. Although it's a diary comic, there isn't really a dated aspect about it at all, except from the dates and like that, a couple of outdated jokes. It's strange though that with it being a sort of 2007-2010 period, it's not really that long ago. Which, when you can actually picture the dates and what you were doing around that time yourself, it's rather grounding in the piece. I've experienced such a kind of phenomenon whilst reading James K Styve recently, which Mark actually cites as an influence at the end, along with some other telling cartoonists that are ever so present in his work, like Jeffrey Brown and Liz Prince and Craig Thompson, which I definitely see, although he is most definitely influenced by regular strip cartoonists as well, and possibly some sort of web comics, I would say. I mean, I see Peanuts and Calvin and Hobbes in there for sure. Control Alt Delete and Penny Arcade as well, definitely. And they were all kind of around that time. Well, Control Alt Delete and Penny Arcade were very much around that time. Peanuts and Calvin and Hobbes, I think if you're doing strips, you're going to be influenced by the greats. So I definitely see elements of that in his work, and I don't really blame him either. I mean, that makes absolute perfect sense. Another influence that I can see is actually Marc Ellerby's own friends that feature heavily in the comic, and one in particular that even has a guest art duty, which is Adam Cadwell. This was kind of made around the same time Cadwell was producing his The Everyday pieces that I actually only discovered recently. The Everyday actually features in amongst it, and Cadwell plays quite a large part in Mark's life throughout this. And like I say, they launched the Great Beast Publishing to launch this actual book, and some of Cadwell's books as well. Speaking of written pieces in the comic, there is a lengthy piece at the start that lets you know where the comic is at, where it came from, and as is written on the back, the fact that there are brand new fill-in pieces that were made that he hadn't before put in the webcomic version. I have got to say that I'm slightly disappointed that it wasn't just all of it in its entirety and that we had stuff cut and added, but it did read really well and flowed really well. I just kind of wish he hadn't told us, but that's the only thing. I think if he had left that part out, I would have had no idea, because he told us at the start as well, I was able to point out what bits had been added because of the change in style, as I previously mentioned. It almost made me look at it harder as well. It made me look at the comic and try and spot the bits where he changed it, and it just kind of made me yearn for the whole thing in its entirety, much like Kuchalka would have done with American Elf. Although, saying that, if it had been any more pages, I think that it might have ruined the size of the actual book, because the size of the book itself, it's great. You can really sort of toss it about, fold it about. It feels more like a kind of notebook, sort of slightly bigger than A5 notebook, sort of sketch pad, and it even has rounded corners as well to kind of emulate a moleskin in which it was all drawn in, which is even more impressive, because I've seen those moleskins. You do get them a wee bit bigger, but to get that amount of detail in that moleskin, it basically translates from the moleskin straight into the comic pages. It's fantastic. I definitely really enjoyed it. It got a lot of laughs out of me. I really love the style. It kept at a good pace, and I got pretty teary throughout it as well. It also handles the mundane day-to-day of a cartoonist comic creator in a pretty non-mundane way, I would say. Kind of kept you guessing from page to page where it was going to go as well. There's a underlying narrative with the relationship and everything that just kind of keeps the story moving. I think if it hadn't had that and it had just been his day-to-day doings, it wouldn't have been near as intriguing to read. Ellerbisms definitely packs a hell of a punch on relationships and the trials and tribulations that come with sharing your life with someone else. Their life and yours intertwining, and if you can make it as the years go on and you both grow and change. From humble beginnings and beyond, where do we end up in just a few short years is exactly what is depicted within Ellerbisms. It's a really great book. The recommended retail price on the back is $12.99, and yet at the time Mark was selling this at Dunfermline for a £5. Even did a wee sketch on the inside. He was actually very pleasant when I met him as well. But just a great piece overall. It's an absolute steal for what I got it for at £5. It's definitely worth more than that. You get a hell of a lot of comic, and you can spend a lot of time on this, so it's definitely worth the $12.99, to which you'll be able to pick up at Marc Ellerby's store. Marc Ellerby, that's MarcEllerby.bigcartel.com, or you can go to marcellerby.com, where you'll get to see all the work that he's putting out. He works on Rick and Morty now. He's done some work on Doctor Who. And you get to see like all these illustrations and find out where he's going to be popping up in the future. You can also follow him on Instagram and Twitter at Marc Ellerby, all smalls. That's MarcEllerby once again. But yeah, definitely keep on top of Marc Ellerby's work, and I thoroughly enjoyed this. It'd been sitting there just kind of staring at me to read for a number of months, and I'm really glad I managed to get a chance to sit down and read it. I don't actually have any shout outs or anything this time around. No Kickstarters or anything that I wanted to shout out. Go on Kickstarter and have a look under the comics section, see if you can see anything that tickles your fancy. If you've got a couple of quid, throw it a creator's way, definitely. This is the time to try and discover some new stuff. Get out on Comic House, or have a look under the comics hashtag that goes about on Twitter and Instagram. See if you can discover something new. If you want to suggest something for me to have a look at and something for me to read, or shout out about your Kickstarter or your comic or something that's coming up, or you've maybe got a comic on Comic House or something you want shouted out, then feel free to get in touch. I'm on Twitter at Uramix, URAMYX, or you can reach me at the podcast, Twitter and Instagram at That Comic Smell, and just point me in the direction. Send me a link, send me a title. I'd love to get to see more comics, and I'd love to introduce you all to more comics. And that's it from Small Press this time. Eat, sleep and breathe comics, and I will see you later.
Okay, on this episode we've got Rees Finlay with us, the creator of Reaffirmation, coming to terms with an autism diagnosis. How are we doing, Rees?
I'm good, all things considered.
All things considered in the COVID-19 situation that we are currently in.
Yes.
Scary days.
It is scary. How are you getting on with that?
It's weird because my lifestyle hasn't changed. I've always lived alone and worked from home, and my only kind of interaction with the outside world was going for walks and going to the shop. So
right.
In that regard, nothing's changed, but the tone of which
yes,
it's been crushing. And hopefully it'll end sooner rather than later, because I think we're on the cusp of a mental health epidemic as well as the COVID-19.
See, I was sort of, and I'm going to be honest, stalking your Twitter.
Oh, God.
And the fact you said nothing's changed concerns me even more. Let's go a few things, shall we? First of all, haircut, how's that doing?
Oh, so I cut my hair by myself from home with clippers.
Is this the first time you've ever done that?
First time I've ever done it. From the front, it looked fine.
right.
It could have gone much worse. And then I took a photo of the back, and there's a huge chunk missing.
Oh no!
And this is why we use hairdressers. Although if no one can see you, it doesn't really matter.
No.
Unless you put pictures up on Twitter.
So on Thursday night, I'll be out there just clapping for the hairdressers. I miss you guys.
The next point I want to question is Dolmio from a jar?
Yeah, I sometimes drink Dolmio from a jar.
Do you actually?
Yeah, it's really nice. It's like a tomato-y treat.
Oh.
It's like a virgin Bloody Mary.
See, this is
Do
what
you stick a celery in the top of the jar?
See, I was concerned. I thought, this is a joke. This is entertainment, but no. He actually does this.
Well, this is the thing with me. All of my jokes sound so nonsense that people don't believe them, but they're all based in reality. But then it opens up this wormhole. If you look at all the comments for that, everyone was like, oh yeah, I do weird food things too. And before that, it was, I wear one sock for temperature control. And everyone's like, oh yeah, we do that. And I was like, what?
Oh.
This is my thing.
Please explain this now.
Yes.
You just take a sock off and you can have a bit of temperature control. And then the one before that was I cut up a pizza with scissors, and I thought that was a weird thing to do, and everyone's like, "Oh no, I do it all the time."
What?
No, I've not done that. I've not done the sock thing, and I've not cut pizza with scissors.
This is. I mean, is a sock thing the same as sticking a foot out of the bed?
Ah.
I guess so. I assume it ties into the autism, and it's a sensory thing, and I like to be certain temperatures, and I like certain textures and sensory things, but it's still weird.
At least you admit it. Right. Another one which is very serious, so we need to discuss this in depth. What's the best Batman movie?
I've narrowed it down to 4.
Yes.
It's either Batman Forever, then we got Batman Forever, and then finally, bit of a wild card this one, Batman Forever.
I'm disappointed.
I was going to say you were very disappointed. It should be Batman and Robin, I think.
I'm disgusted.
It's peak shitposting. You say the most stupid thing, and it really gets a reaction out of people.
Well, like I said, at least it wasn't Batman and Robin.
Oh, come on, that was awesome.
Oh, Jesus.
See, I grew up with Batman and Robin on video, and it was I had 3 videos as a kid: Batman and Robin, the Star Wars trilogy, and a pirate copy of Shrek 2. Can you imagine the mind of a man who was raised watching those 3 films on a loop?
The disappointment when I saw Batman and Robin, it was just too strong.
I loved it.
Yeah, but you're weird.
I know.
And finally, last thing we need to discuss. You've been missing having your friends around as well.
Yeah, all my celebrity friends.
Yeah,
Robert De Niro, Ian McKellen.
Yeah.
Detective John Shithouse, that's an original character.
Explain the thought process behind this video.
Well, you know, it's quarantine. There's obviously this big gold rush to make content during this time. And I don't know, I think I'm the Tom Green of autism Twitter. I just kind of do the stupidest, most mundane, childish shit to get a rise out of people, and people get so angry about it. It's incredible.
Seriously? I thought that's hilarious. It's ridiculous, but hilarious.
My Robert De Niro impression is obviously Al Pacino. But people would rather think I was an idiot rather than
think it was
the secret genius that I
am.
Yeah.
What's your Twitter profile? At Rees Time, is it?
At Rees Time.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be used in a court case or something one day to see it.
Go follow it. It's really entertaining. He really is hilarious. And we need a bit of silliness in these current times. So yeah, even if he's being serious.
But I think I think when I'm being serious, people think I'm joking. When I'm think I'm being serious.
Oh no!
Like I was talking about that Shia LaBeouf film the other day, Honey Boy.
Okay.
And I said, "Oh no, it's not. It's not the tale of a man who gets bitten by a radioactive bee. It's actually about how a man becomes a cannibal." And someone got really angry saying Shia LaBeouf is not a cannibal. And I was like, would you sooner think that I'm an idiot than someone just taking the piss?
Oh.
See,
that's peak Twitter.
I can believe Shia LaBeouf would be a cannibal, but it fits.
I just want to do the just do it thing.
Just do it. Right, let's get a bit more serious then. Comics as a kid, what were you reading?
Lots of Spider-Man. Loved Spider-Man, but it was the first movie that got me into it, which is unpure. But yeah, that was kind of what broke me in, and so it's mainly mainstream things until quite later in the game, 2015 era. I really got into Hellblazer. That was the thing where I read it and I was like, oh, I kind of want to do comics now. And I quit a very high-paying job and was like, I'm just going to self-publish a comic and see what happens.
Really? So what were you working then? What were you doing?
I was a debt collector. You go door to door collecting the loan payments in one of the scariest, roughest areas of Coventry. And as someone in their early 20s, I was not built for that. And it broke me down to the point where I was willing to quit everything and try and make a comic. Which is obviously, it's a cry for help for making a comic.
Is that all comic creators?
It's all of us.
It's all of them.
I speak on behalf of everyone.
Okay. So what did you first create then? What was your first comic?
It was like this weird little mental health thing, semi-autobiographical. So you could start seeing the nuggets of what would eventually become my brand. But I kind of flopped about. I was doing that. I was doing some crappy, pointless superhero stuff. And then I was in a car accident at the end of that year, and that kind of took me back out of it, and I ended up going back and working in retail for a bit.
Oh, dear.
Terrible. But that kind of gave me time to think a bit more and work out what I wanted to do and find my voice.
Okay.
And I did a proper big graphic novel that was all about my time working for the loan company. But it's kind of got this Fight Club sort of thing going on where in the moments that would inspire the fictional moments in my comics, those fictional characters would start folding into it. So it was quite interesting in that regard, and I'm still really proud of that book. But then years later to be diagnosed autistic, going back and looking at that, and it's like, oh, I wish I made autism a part of that story. But obviously I had no idea at the time, so it's
something you could go back to maybe and reevaluate and redo.
I have thought about that. Like if I was to do another book, I could mash up that and reaffirmation into something similar but different, and maybe with a bit more of a narrative structure than reaffirmation had.
Okay, well, let's jump to reaffirmation because that's really what we want to talk about. So it's essentially about you finding out you have autism. You caught autism. No, you have autism.
When I got my vaccines,
but very late on in life, where usually it tends to be found earlier during the childhood. What was your initial feeling when you were told you had autism?
It was very mixed. I mean, there was quite hypocritical in that I acknowledged it and accepted it. I saw those traits, and after a quick Google, it was fair to assume I was. But there was also that kind of, you spend 25 years of your life thinking you're quote unquote normal, only to be told, oh no, you've got this condition, which I perceive as a disability. I find it disabling. So it was very hard to come to terms with that. And I don't know, I think autistic people have special interests, and I think autism became my special interest once the diagnosis came about. So this book was inevitable, and it was very interesting, opening my eyes to that big world and the culture around it as well. I mean, it's a very emotionally highly strung thing. Everyone's quite sensitive in that field. So for me to, as you said with my Twitter and stuff, to be that kind of person in that realm, it's risky, but hopefully it could break new ground and maybe change the game. How did you find it linked back to your past? So when you found out you had autism, did you see the links of how you acted in certain circumstances as a child or as a teenager? Oh, massively. And it's surprising that it never came up before that. I think I was tested as a child, but my memories of it, I was just kind of giving them the answers I thought they wanted rather than any honest reflection of myself. So I kind of flew under the radar in that sense. But I don't know. If I was diagnosed earlier, would things have been different? Or would they have been kind of just as bad on the... It was a rough path to get to the diagnosis, and I don't think anyone should get diagnosed on the back of such... It shouldn't have to reach a breaking point, is what I'm saying, before you get the diagnosis.
Could you explain what was that breaking point, or what took you to that point?
There's only so much I can legally say, but it was a perfect storm of, workplace, personal life, and it was just a complete mental breakdown. And then speaking to the doctors, they referred me for the diagnosis, which is then a 1-year wait as well. So if you're left in that limbo with your own thoughts, it's a lot to dwell on. Yeah.
So with that in mind, then, what made you decide to create the book?
It was to impress a girl. I know it's gone on to be something quite admirable, and it's made quite an impact. But it all comes back to my penis and trying to impress.
Just typical male.
Yeah. Exactly. She had all these dinosaur tattoos, and I was like, hey. Being autistic means I'm just like you, except I can name all the dinosaurs. And I drew this picture of me as Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park with the shirt open.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, that's quite funny. I could do little comic skits about autism, and that would be quite a good marriage of what I do and what I am.
Mm-hmm.
And then it quickly became clear, if you're going to make jokes, you can't just make jokes because it looks insensitive or offensive or making light of something that shouldn't be made light of. So you have to bounce back with serious stuff, which is where the writing came in. If I was to do a sequel or something, it would be pure comics. But at that point, you need written text to just clarify some certain points and really explain yourself.
Well, that's something that's different about this comic. I prefer graphic novel is a perfect term for it, just because it's written word as well as comic process. Did you feel that you couldn't draw the whole thing? Did you feel it wouldn't explain it well enough, or why did you go for the two styles?
It was definitely because it needed that extra detail, because as I was saying, it's a very sensitive tribe that I'm in, and if you make a joke on its own, people can take it the wrong way and get quite upset. And while that's never the intention, if it's being received that way, you have to then just stand and go, oh no, just by the way, I'm well aware it's a serious topic, and let me explain that. But also let's have a laugh with it. Yeah. It's a very delicate balance. And, maybe I think I just about pulled it off, but it's about showing that you can be sensitive and understanding while also having a bit of a laugh with it. Because I think a lot of activism, especially online and stuff, it all comes from a place of anger, and it's quite vitriolic. And I don't know if that's the productive way to do it.
I think one of the best things I think that's happened on TV the past 10 years is The Last Leg, and the way they deal with disability and comedy, and they focus purely on the comedy. And I think that is the way forward. If people want to understand disability in whatever form that takes, I think comedy personally is a way forward, and it really brings it to the mainstream.
Yeah, well, me and Joe, Joe's 16, is my eldest, and he's autistic. We'll joke about his autism, and he'll go, I'm playing the disability card now, Mum, if he doesn't want to do the washing up. So, I think you've got to keep it light as well, because it's something you have to live with. It's not all doom and gloom.
Massively. I used to compare myself to Caitlin Moran, but I know that she's been a naughty girl this week with the lockdown, so I can't compare myself in a positive way.
No,
but what she was doing for feminism by being funny with it, I think it makes more of a lasting impression. There's two ways to make a dent in something. It's to either be funny or be controversial. And I don't think I'd live with myself if I was being controversial or provocative in that way.
No, but certainly being funny. And I think people's outside view of autism is the heavier side, where people really struggle. So to see someone like yourself basically acting, dare say, normally and having a laugh is a positive thing, so that they can see, people with autism are just, they can do everything with just that hint of disability in the background. I think it's really important personally.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance. I mean, I don't want to use functioning labels because I know they're not very popular, but you don't want to do it where you're, for want of a better word, people might perceive me as high functioning. I'd probably say I was mid functioning, but when people see that, they feel it's an insult to the people who are more vulnerable and don't survive as well. Not that I survive that well, but
looking at your Twitter.
Exactly, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it's a very delicate conversation you have to have, and you have to acknowledge that autism is so broad that there's a great quote: if you've met one person with autism, you met one person with autism.
Yeah.
And it's really important to hold on to that, and you can't speak in sweeping generalizations. You can't, I was hugely against formatting the book as a guide or anything like that, because it has to be a first person experience, and ideally you'd want to read 100 books from 100 different autistic authors to get a sense of what the picture's like.
Yeah.
So what sort of reception have you had in regards to the book from people with autism?
Oh, it's been incredible. I think there's not been a mass market for late diagnosed autistics, and while there is support out there, it's very limited due to budget strains on the NHS and the charities that run them, and I can only see that getting worse in the near future. So it's been great to have that kind of way to connect with people in my camp. We've been late diagnosed, we've flown under radar, and now we've just kind of left a bit lost and confused. So to rally around and meet people like that, that's been the most important bit, and to be able to make a tangible difference, because my two big concerns in autism, I don't consider myself like an advocate or activist or anything online, but in the real world, I really want to usher about some change in regards to better post-diagnosis support for adults and better workplace environments for adults. And doing this book has really opened doors to get involved with some organisations and hopefully make a change in the future.
Excellent. Well, you're going to let your Joe read it, aren't you?
Yes.
I think it's not for younger kids, but it's certainly something teenagers upwards can read and have a look at. And I think, to me, there's not enough adults talking about their autism. It tends to be more focused on the youngsters and the kids, and there doesn't seem to be any media about adults and how they cope with it and deal with it. So I think something like this and passing it down to certainly high school kids would certainly be very interesting, very useful, I feel. Have you had any feedback from kids reading it at all? I mean, I know there's some areas in there that maybe that's why I said
I've
older.
had people buy it and go, I'm going to give it to my kid. I'm like,
it's definitely teenage on, the higher teenagers.
Mine's 16. It'll be fine.
Because I'm curious to why the market is so aimed at kids. It's not that it's a bad thing that they do have so much out there for children or for parents, but there is this huge glaring gap in the market for content for adults. Or content by adults for adults as well.
It almost feels like you find out you've got autism as a kid, then you learn to deal with it, then not bothered after that, not interested.
Just left alone, aren't you?
Get on with it. That's how it feels.
People who I've met who were diagnosed earlier are considerably different than the people late diagnosed, and they're a lot more, speaking broadly, they're a lot more comfortable in their own skin. And I think the late diagnosed people are still on that journey to try and work it out. And some people get there a bit earlier than others, but it's a very much an ongoing journey to kind of come to terms with it.
Yeah, definitely.
So in regards to your artwork, you've not just been working on that though, have you? You do also do trading card work as well, is that right?
I've been doing the trading cards for about 2 to 3 years now, and that's a very exciting thing to be a part of, doing the artwork for the trading cards, because again, I grew up with Star Wars and stuff, so to then be an official artist on it it's incredible. The pay's pretty bad. The doors that will open, the bragging rights that come from that.
Well, I say the branding,
it lends you so much credibility for when you're doing something like a book about autism. And, if we do live in a society that looks down on autistic people, they're going to think, oh, good for you. Look, he's done a little book. We'll put that on the fridge. Bless him. And then, but if you go, I also worked on Star Wars and Stranger Things, it'll lend it a bit of credibility and they'll take a punt on it.
Yeah. And
then realise, look. You know,
right, let's just do some quick questions then. Now, we designed these with the idea of people not being stuck in their houses, to be fair. So they might not quite work, but we're going to try it anyway.
Go for it.
And I'm going to be really awkward and ask, see if you remember this. What's the last meal you ate in a restaurant?
I think it was Yo Sushi, because I can't stop thinking about Yo Sushi, and I miss them so much. Guys, if you're listening, I miss you. Just come back.
Send him some delivery. Send him some.
That'd be amazing. I miss the real world. Do you remember when the world functioned and shops were open and
You could just wander around a shop without buying anything and not feeling guilty.
Yeah.
Well, no, you feel guilty because the security guy looks at you.
Yes. Yeah, I always think, I'm not buying anything, but now I feel I have to buy something because he's definitely looking at me.
We live in Kendal. We don't have security guards. What are you on about?
I still feel guilty about just pootling around a shop. Not that I can now. But yeah.
Last movie you saw at a cinema?
Birds of Prey, I think it was.
Oh, and?
That's all right. That's not a bad thing to leave it on.
Mm-hmm.
Was it enjoyable? We've not seen that yet.
No.
It's good. I think it's
that's one hell of a review. Okay. The last comic you read?
Probably my own. I'll admit I've been really bad on the comics reading. I've just received my copy of Barking by Lucy Sullivan.
Yeah.
So she's lovely.
I'm waiting to be in a good headspace to read it. I think right now, with everything going on in the world, I don't think I'm in the best frame to read it. So I'll wait till I'm in a better place and then expose myself to some depression.
Yeah.
We've got that to read.
Yes,
and I'm struggling to get it to load on the iPad. It's that big.
Oh, no.
There's so much art in there. I'm looking forward, though. I must admit, I'm looking forward to getting stuck into that. And the last thing, what was the last TV series you finished in full?
Star Trek Picard.
Oh.
So good.
And your opinion?
It's good.
Oh, no.
Oh. This squeaky it's good is not good.
It could be taken either way. It's like Twitter. Well, if I stayed to the end, it was obviously quite enjoyable.
Yeah.
But then everyone got off of each other at the end. Spoilers. Like just everyone's getting off of each other.
Yeah, there was a bit of that, wasn't there?
I was really expecting Picard just to start making out with just anyone.
Oh, you see, I loved it. I almost cried every single episode, but that's because we grew up with Picard.
Yes.
We're not young like you.
Yeah, I've only really cherry-picked the next-gen episodes. But they call the dog number one because he can't sit on chairs properly and he's always humping. So I got that one.
That's about right, actually.
So, Comic Cons. Did you have any planned this year? Do you have any planned this year? How does that work for you?
Oh, I miss Remember Comic Cons?
Remember you could walk around places, just chat to anyone you wanted?
Within 2 meters.
Like Peter K's going to have so much material. Do you remember X, Y?
Do you remember when Peter K toured?
We had tickets for that.
Yes, we did.
When I had a career. My nana's got COVID.
oh, man.
Oh, no, right, okay. Just like this podcast goes out after now. This isn't live, so just in case anything happens in the meantime, I didn't mean that. But yeah, the only one I had booked was Coventry Comic Con in October, so there's a slim chance that might still happen.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully, by that point, it's up and running.
But I think it can go either way when the lockdown lifts. Either everyone's going to really rush out and start spending money and having a good time, or everyone's going to be quite cautious. And I think maybe the Comic Cons might be a bit quieter in the immediate future. But we'll see what happens on that one. Hopefully,
you're probably right.
It is people just throwing money around because they want to have a nice time. But we'll see.
How do you I'm going to quickly jump back to autism. How do you find Comic Cons and large groups of people? Does that affect you? Because I know Joe, that can struggle with Joe, can't it?
He closes his eyes and then I have to guide him out. Yeah.
Yeah, occasionally when I go as a tourist, I'll get a bit overwhelmed and have to step outside. But it's weird. Autism's very hypocritical. Like, so I don't like crowded areas. I don't like busy things like sensory overload. Yep. So in theory, Comic-Con is hell for me, but it's the most exciting part of the year. And you just got to learn to embrace certain hypocrisies of it all. And Comic-Con's one of those. And it's, I haven't took Reformation to an event yet, so it will be exciting to see how well it goes down, because I think there is definitely a huge crossover between people on the spectrum and nerds. Sweaty nerds.
Well, we're talking NCM in particular, sweaty nerds. Now that's a sweaty nerd fest.
Yeah. Joe loved it though, but I did have to take him out and just have a quiet time, and then we went back in again.
That's because of all of the.
He likes Hatsune Miku.
Yeah.
Very crowded though, MCM. I think they should probably just get into the hall and space out a bit more.
It is a very different sort of Comic Con compared to our standard, proper Comic Cons. I'm going to say, it's a bit too busy.
Well, I'm only short, so it's a lot of armpits for me.
Armpits and sweaty men.
Yeah.
So in regards to reading Reaffirmation, where can you get hold of it?
It is on Amazon, but I know Amazon's got a little bit of issues with their KDP program while the pandemic's going on. So if you want a paperback, you can order it on there. It just might take a little bit longer. So the best way to do it immediately is Comic House. The interface on Comic House is a lot better than the digital stuff on the Kindle. So yeah, just go through Comic House.
Just sign up to Comic House and have a read.
I think they've got a month off, haven't they?
They have, yes, yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually going to make it this week because I'm doing a Comic House book club through the Awesome Comic Podcast website. We're going to make your comic the one to read this week.
Oh, thank you. I'll PayPal you the money in a minute.
I think it does, because my whole idea of this is to pull out comics that people may not have looked at or may not have seen or haven't been focused on the website. So I think that'll be perfect, something different.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've only been, mainly I go after the autism audience. I haven't really hit the comics audience yet, because I haven't done any Comic Cons or anything. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes down in a different sphere. Because I know you mentioned on your review and a few episodes ago, they can be relatable to people who don't have autism as well.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
I've really been thinking about that a lot, and it's because I'm a big fan of still staying part of the human race, and there's a lot of circles in the autism tribes that are very us versus them.
Yeah,
we all have
keep us apart, and I find that so discomforting. I really want to integrate rather than segregate.
Especially at this moment in time, we're all stuck, concerned in our house. We've all got those worries and those fears, and however that comes out, we're still the same people at the end of the day.
Exactly.
It just people deal with it differently. So it definitely, some of the points in particular definitely jumped out and linked with everyone.
Yeah, definitely.
So
I think we all have our coping mechanisms. Some people are getting into the conspiracy theories. 5G, Bill Gates is going to kill us all.
That's it.
And some people are running polls on which was the best Batman movie, and all the answers are Batman Forever. Different strokes for different folks.
Right, so please, guys, go and I'm going to put that up probably tomorrow for everyone in the book club to go and read, and leave a review. As I keep saying, leave a review as long as it's positive. Leave a review. Go and check it out. I mean, it's what Comic House, even without the free thing, is £3 a month.
Yeah,
so
nothing.
Go and check this piece of work out. I think it's important for everyone to read and understand. Right, thank you so much for your time, Rees.
I'm going to go on my government mandated walk now. That'll be fun.
Oh, make sure you keep those 2 meters away.
From who? I don't know anyone. People cross the street to avoid me anyway. I'm fine.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Room for one lawgiver, please.
Judge Dredd. Or is it just Dredd? Fancy seeing you here.
Catwoman, you also here for the Comic Art Festival or a stint in the ISO cubes?
Of course. I love to see my makers in action. Watch it, Greenie.
Careful, Hulk. In this town we have a saying. Once is a coincidence, twice is a booking offence.
I think he booked the events on the website.
Huh?
ComicArtFestival.com. It's got all the perfect information about the event.
Yeah, so's my fist. Drock, I'm out of here. Not standing around with those 4 tortoises that have just entered the building. Cowbunga, dude!
Find out all about the Lakes International Comic Art Festival and booking information at www.comicartfestival.com.
How do? Welcome to Mutterdowns, the yakking endlessly about comics section of the podcast. I'm Pete Taylor. I'm the creative Silverbeard, an indie comic you need to read from catfoodcomics.com. Online I trade as This Man, This Pete. And, as always, the mutterings will be supplied by...
Mike Williams. I'm comic fan, obsessive and podcaster, and I generally write about comics and role-playing games on Twitter at CthulhuPunk.
So, we are now into episode 2 of the comic book genre World Cup. The excuse that we are now using to yak about more comics. Now, the basic idea you came up with was to find the genre that ruled them all, if it was possible. What is the comic book genre that would win when endlessly talked about. So we're on episode 2 now. We've not. Did we announce last episode which was going to be on today? Which genres we'd be talking about?
I'm not sure if we did actually.
No,
maybe not. All the genres.
Only 2 weeks ago, but this isolation is really messing my timekeeping.
It really is.
I don't know what day it is. I'll absolutely be honest. I think it's Tuesday. Episode should be going out tomorrow, Wednesday the 15th. But, it really is. You just don't know sometimes.
It is a bit mad, isn't it? We had 16 genres to start off with. We randomly allotted those into 4 groupings.
That's
so
right.
This is the second group match, which will be
Group
4
B.
genres playing against each other, which we'll randomly determine after.
Yes. So
Group B, yes. I keep forgetting neither of us really know anything about football or football terminology, so why we chose to do a World Cup format, I don't know.
I had to look something up. Oh, that was it. It wasn't so much looking something up football. I was trying to work out in my head whether we were doing quarterfinals now or we'd be going into the quarterfinals.
Going in, I think.
I think we're going
then
in.
Then it'll be a semi and final. I think. I don't know.
I know. So unsporty. But a quick isolation catch up. How's it been going indoors?
Oh, well, yes, not too bad. We're kind of coping. We're going into survivalist mode. I noticed we took a crate apart just to rebuild it, just to make some raised beds, and we're going to start growing some food. If that's not survivalist panicking, I don't know what is. Myself, well, actually, both of us, we've been entertaining ourselves using Roll20 to play various role-playing games online for the odd 5-hour or 6-hour session here and there, which normally involves drinking as well, which I'm sure isn't good at the rate we're going. Yeah, it's been interesting. I've been doing lots of painting and stuff. I'm not a comic artist, but I do like to paint little toy soldiers, and that's been going wonderfully, which is so nice. And I've been working a lot because I'm a home worker anyway, and I really haven't had any more time than I normally have. But I've got this Easter off, and I've decided to still take it off, and both of us are kind of indulging in crafty hobbies.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's all pretty stable and similar here. Me and my wife always work from home, so there's not much change. Both my girls have still got the projects that they're working on. Nancy's painting her A-level art piece downstairs. Daisy's working on a brewery label for her illustration degree. So all of that stuff is carrying on. I did a piece for the baseball mugs hashtag for Vinny the Eel Moray. I drew that online last week.
You might have to explain that a bit more, actually. It's been a bit of a really cool Twitter little thing going on between comic artists, isn't it?
It's nice, isn't it? Yeah, I think it was Russell Mark Olsen and a mate of his. I don't know if they were just talking about baseball and baseball cards, because I missed the tweet. I think came in like 2 days later when everyone was going, yeah, let's do it, as I always do, always late to the party. So yeah, I did notice all of these kind of madcap baseball players getting tweeted by lots of different artists. So finally got around to doing mine. I think the hashtag it's baseball mugs, I think, or something like that. I can't remember the hashtag. Useless. Yeah, so I did a character, funnily enough, who already existed. There's a sort of, as usual with me, there's some sort of secret history. He actually gets a credit in Silverbeard, my indie comic. One page I list as being inked by Vinny the Eel Moray. So when this baseball thing started, I thought it would be interesting if I thought it was a good name for a picture. I could just imagine him in this kind of serpentine, slightly over the top pose as they do when they're winding up to throw the baseball. So I endeavoured to bring him to life through one of these baseball sketches. So yeah, I ended up making up a previous history that he was a pretty nasty piece of work in baseball, untrustworthy baseball player. And then ultimately, I didn't have enough characters to mention it on the Twitter post, but I imagined that after he got kicked out of baseball, he then went on to a slightly low key career as an inker in cat food comics. I always imagine him as the kind of Vince Coletta level of inker. It's just slightly lazy, would rub out probably most of the pencils, and wasn't that popular with fans because he wasn't that popular as a baseball player. So
the hashtag is Major League Mugs.
Major League Mugs. It wasn't baseball. Yeah, Major League Mugs. Yeah. So lots of friends of the podcast have done versions of that. So look it up online. It's been some good fun, and I sent some artwork off. I think Russell is hoping to actually get them printed. So I will mention where people can get hold of them if that eventually comes to pass. But more, lots of comic stuff going on. The creative community is, rushing to fill that isolation gap, because the other thing I know we've both seen a lot of people post online is the 6 fan art.
I was about to mention that. It is 6 fan arts challenge is the hashtag. Yeah. And I have to ask quickly. We know your partner in crime, Marc, has been doing some. Has he got them all filled up, the slots? Because I was going to ask for one.
Oh, well, I've not. The last I saw, I think, the last one I saw had 3 pieces in it.
Yeah.
Seen he'd done the Crow, Zatanna, and what was the last one that he'd done on there as well? Oh, cracking work. To be honest, I reckon he's certainly got it in him to do more than one. So if he's filled up the 6, then definitely tap him up for the next 6, because Jonathan Edwards, have you seen how many Jonathan Edwards is producing?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was a one-off, but they just... the idea is you suggest to an artist a random... Right. Sometimes put a theme to it, like it's got to be a small press thing, but it's basically a character. It could be film, TV, depending on what they're kind of into.
Yes.
And they're just doing little fan arts, and it's 6 panels, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Vince Hunt from Awesome Comics podcast might have introduced the small press twist.
Yes.
So apologies if I'm wrong, but I think it was Vince. So he'd put like a little... Added the small little
arrow, didn't he, on the standard picture of the blank boxes.
Gustavo Vargas, he's done some small press, some specific, and I know Jonathan Edwards just keeps churning his out as well. I mean, and they are just crazily mixed and varied and all fantastic. So that's a great hashtag to look up as well if people haven't seen those. And then the other thing that came up was this idea of a quarantine comic, which it's the brainchild of Jordan Thomas, who wrote Frank at Home on the Farm, which was a Kickstarted horror comic that I backed. And I think it was tweeted about with a list the other day at Jordan_J_Thomas if people want to look up and stay in touch with the comic. But Jordan's idea was he had an idea inspired by quarantine and a family enduring social isolation with a bit more of a kind of genre sci-fi twist. And his idea was he had a 25-page story and asked 25 artists to do a page for each. So he's quickly amassed quite the list of artists to work with him. I was asked to do a page, which was it's a huge list of incredibly talented people. I would advise people to look it up online. Jordan_J_Thomas. But lots of friends of the podcast and other great.
Lots.
Yeah.
I'm looking through the list now.
Yeah, it's fab. So
there's some really cool people on there.
Yeah, the project is very, it's the first time I've been involved with something like this. So you can imagine having, you've got to have this continuity between characters. So Russell Mark Olsen has been involved, and he's designed some of the characters, and they've got like a Slack project, a site for passing on all of the different room plans and character designs. So it really is well organised and full of super talented people. So that's going to be interesting.
I was amazed when you told me earlier. Shaky Kane is one of the names as well, which is like somebody I've not seen anything from for so long. And I
was chuffed a bit to see him being listed. Yeah, I love Shaky. For me, the comic strip I always think of is Amen from Deadline.
Yeah, well, that's how I first came across Shaky.
Exactly. Yeah, it's that first port of call. But I know he's done stuff for 2000 AD, and he's had a recent title, Bulletproof Coffin, for Image.
No, it's a good. Buzzing's come back again. Tap the microphone. Come on. Is it because of where it is? If you're leaning on the desk.
My makeshift. I need to explain to the readers. Actually, you mentioned my desk because I'm not in my normal.
Not your usual studio.
Office, my normal studio where I've got a proper chair and a proper desk. No, I've got 2 dining room chairs pushed together, and I'm as close to the bedroom door as possible, because if I go where I normally go and have the laptop precariously balanced on the ottoman, then it's the worst possible spot for Wi-Fi. And I've done a couple of interviews over there, and I just always gets a bit stuttery, or a little bit the Wi-Fi goes. So I've kind of made myself a nice little makeshift desk.
I'll do that if the static comes back on
the recording.
Tapping the microphone gets rid of it.
Right, we'll just put the thumbs up, and then I'll just keep tapping it. One last mention for any other creative people out there who need anything else to get involved in is the Race into Space competition, which we did mention last episode, which is the competition run by the Lakes Festival itself, which is, they've asked for a 4 to 6 page story, tales of daring do in space. Have a look on the festival website for all of the details. I think you've got until July to put something together for that, but good use of time for the moment. I think it's a £500 cash prize for this one as well. So that's probably good, quite handy.
Pretty good exposure from it as well. Let's face it, that's the real prize.
Yes, there's talk of it being put into a digital comic collection, I think, as well, an anthology. Yeah. So probably alongside lots of other cool artists. Creative.
Right, results from last time then. So in Group A, as it's now known, we did sport versus...
We never thought to name the group.
I don't know about these things. We did sport versus romance, and romance came out the winner. And then we did crime versus western, and crime came out the winner.
Controversial.
As it seems, we had some feedback, and most of it is around western. I guess they were 2 strong contenders, and I actually, although it was me arguing for western, I didn't think it was as liked generally as I would have thought crime. But that's what I've got the most feedback about. Tom, on our podcast, was very upset at Western not getting through, and gave me a load of cool things to read, which I'd read some of them, but some of them were new, which is quite cool. Richard Schaefer, I've got to say sorry to. He does a great little blog about vintage comics, and he's so knowledgeable on the old vintage Western stuff, and gave me a load of stuff to look up. And it's a shame, actually. It was one of those conversations that was just too late. Otherwise, I think I would have actually got him on the podcast just to boost up my segment a bit.
We can maybe put some of Tom and your friend's suggestions up on the podcast website, actually.
Yeah.
Good thing to do. Yeah, because part of the World Cup, of course, is to give us an excuse to talk about comics, like we need one, but also putting forward ideas for reads that people haven't necessarily thought of or considered, putting forward unknown titles that you've now potentially got the time for, is one of the reasons that we're doing this as well. So if you do have any titles or comics that we've missed and not discussed, do send them in, and we'll, even if we've not managed to mention them on our group discussion, we can mention them in the kind of little feedback section when we do another group, or when we do the kind of quarterfinals or something. Because I think it perhaps, especially when we do get a bit of extra knowledge from something like Western, it might be worth us revisiting it and putting some extra ideas out there.
Yes, yeah. You had some feedback as well, didn't you?
Yes, I had. It's not often we get feedback, so here we go. I had an email from Gustavo Vargas, Scroll Lord. My dear Pete, after listening to you and Mike talk about comics and be astounded by all that vast knowledge, I needed to do something to make myself feel like I know something about comics that you don't. Wahahaha. So he then goes on to tell us about a Peruvian comic strip called Selva Misteriosa, Mysterious Jungle, by Javier Flores da Guia, published by the biggest Peruvian newspaper as a daily comic strip from 71 to 74. The cartoonist would draw his pages in between the time he'd made while he was studying medicine, and he's now changed career and he's become a neurologist. So it was cancelled after the military coup, and it never saw print, and it was one of the greatest Peruvian comics ever made that people would speak about, but nobody had seen. And then 2 years ago, it was collected into a beautiful book, which Gustavo has kindly attached to the email. The art is breathtaking. There are some original pages that got lost, and the author willingly redrew some of the missing pages from the newspaper clips. Yeah. So I'll stick some of the photos and the link that Gustavo has sent. And the email ends with, now I feel better.
I love the fact that we've now got a letters corner to the podcast.
Yeah. Feedback forum. Well, we need a little natty name for it, but yeah, really gorgeous artwork. I mean, I suppose it's not really. I mean, it's called Mysterious Jungle, so I don't quite know what genre it is, but there's some really trippy visuals on the last page, on the last photo that Gustavo sent, which is really, really gorgeous. So I'll stick those on the forum site. So thank you, Gustavo. Keep educating me, man. I absolutely adored the pages you sent. And if anybody else has any other genres or favourite comics that they want to tell us about to make sure that other people know about them, please send them into our new section.
Feedback corner. We're working with project titles. Working projects.
Yeah. Not good on that. Group B. Yeah. So that brings us to today's Group B category, doesn't it? So
it does. We're going to play 2 matches today.
Yeah.
So we've prepped a couple of genres each, and we're going to do a random draw now as to what plays what. Left or right hand?
Left.
Okay.
It says pointing to your right.
I did say my left. So I will be representing horror.
Horror. Okay. So what is horror playing?
Right hand.
Horror is playing non-fiction.
Ooh. Non-fiction reality.
Non-fiction reality stroke documentary stroke non-fiction. Okay. Who's going? Do you want to go first?
Yep, sure. So I guess what I've prepared first is probably like a little bit of a background as to the history of horror comics, which is quite straightforward up until really 2000 onwards, where I'm just going to count it as the modern horror genre, really. But really, again, like many many comic genres, it is one of the original American comic genres. The Universal films of the 30s, like Dracula, Frankenstein, and The Mummy, really influenced the American population, and it was obvious that it would influence comics as well. A lot of titles started suddenly bringing in horror elements. Rather than being horror titles yet, it was more a case of the superhero and crime comics of the day started bringing in some elements from these rather popular cinematic monsters. Even Batman Fights a Vampire. There was a crime comic I came across, and I've forgotten the name of it now, which again brought in a supernatural element of a mummy, whereas ordinarily it would never stray outside of the realms of real crime. The movies influenced the first real horror comics, I guess, in the early 40s, when they were just straight adaptations of classic horror novels. Robert Louis Stevenson's Strange Case of Jekyll and Hyde, Shelley's Dracula, and they did actually start continuing some of those stories. I think there was one called The Continued Adventures of Frankenstein or something similar. But the first serialized horror comics were Adventures into the Unknown from the American Comics Group, and the more recognizable, I guess, or famous Eerie comic from Avon Periodicals. These saw horror move out of just being a bit player within superhero comics, but actually being a solid genre in their own right. Again, the story of it's amazing how much of this you can actually find online of these defunct comics, and it's very much similar plot lines between them. It always seems to be women being menaced by strange and dangerous monsters, which, again, it's just a nod back to the original Universal films. And those films really did kind of spark off the horror movement as such. It's always had a literary basis, but as a popular genre, the movies really started it all. The post-war comic boom saw crime, and then romance, and then horror emerge as big comic genres of choice. EC Comics headed this expansion with the infamous The Haunt of Fear, Vault of Horror, and Tales from the Crypt, which is instantly recognisable thanks to the amazing 80s film, which I still love. Oh, yeah. I say 80s, God, it wasn't late 70s, was it? Oh, it might have been. This was really this is where I think that horror comics started more, because they're more of the short, twisty type affairs. more Tales of the Unexpected style, heavy horror elements, heavy on the blood and gore as well. The anthologies are always hosted by a fictional character like the Vault Keeper, the Witch, or the Crypt Keeper. And there was just a slew of copycat type comics, all 1,000,001 just different variations of the names that would include the word weird or vault or crypt. Just too many to go through. And this was the boom years. Horror was making up 25% of the market, which I think's amazing, really, considering, you've got crime and romance and, of course, superhero as well. It actually took up more of the market than I thought at that time. And mentioned quite heavily last episode comes the big crunch with horror. It was a mix between crime and horror comics that caused this backlash. But it was Dr. Frederick Wortham and his article, Seduction of the Innocent, that sparked almost ironically the comic Witch Trials. And he targeted EC Comics directly in his reports. One of the major pieces of evidence that was brought forward along with this to the Senate committee hearings in 1954 was the crime suspense stories 22, the Axe Maniac with the woman's head. It's a classic comic cover, isn't it?
Yeah.
And weirdly enough, actually, there was a little curio shop in Kendal. I don't know whether or not Ian introduced you to that, but it did lots of sort of like old comic style things like plaques or posters and things like that. And I remember that they actually had that as like an enamel picture.
Cool.
I don't know whether it's for the wall or the fridge, I don't know. But I mean, it's such a classic, it's just embedded almost.
Cool.
But this was basically trying to link crime and horror to juvenile delinquency. We did talk quite a bit about this last time, didn't we? But I forgot to mention my favourite part of that was the Batman-Robin relationship was really heavily criticised as promoting homosexuality, which is kind of laughable nowadays, almost to the point where you think, like, well, yeah, it might have, actually, but who cares? But it was specifically, Robin used to stand with a wide stance. That in particular was the biggest problem they had. But anyway, I know we keep saying we're going to keep talk. We need to talk about this more in depth sometime. But I love chipping away at this. But this, of course, led to the Comic Code Authority, which was kind of a bit of a nail in the coffin for a lot of different genres of comics. In fact, it was really curtailed what they were able to portray, what the stories were like, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And particularly EC, you mentioned, the Senate going for them. The Comics Code essentially outlawed pretty much everything that EC were publishing. So
it was a direct attack.
The rest of the comics industry basically threw them under the bus.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them, they kind of went into... They say it was always a voluntary code, but basically the threat was... you would be removed from distribution lists and the distributors wouldn't have anything to do with you. So it wasn't really voluntary. I mean, the reaction, obviously, DC and Marvel, they had horror titles out there. House of Mystery and House of Secrets. Marvel had Strange Tales.
Mm-hmm.
The weird thing about Strange Tales is that still going.
It comes back, doesn't it, to keep the copyright?
Yeah.
Tales of Suspense.
For me, it's the one that you kind of see more often than not when you're going through those conventions and stuff. But Journey into Mystery as well. And they kind of morphed into away from horror and more into suspense and mystery and throw in a couple of sci-fi. So they kind of meandered away from what I'd call horror anyway.
Yeah.
But Warren Publishing in the 60s decided to completely get around CCA rulings because they only applied to comics. So they produced magazines. And that's where you got Creep, Eerie, and they introduced Vampirella for the first time as well. Eerie Publications went one step further and simply reprinted all the pre-CCA tales of voodoo, horror tales, terror tales, all that kind of stuff in magazine format, because if it's a magazine, it's not corrupting the minds of the young. I don't know. I never got around.
Yeah, it's like, they're not going to read anything in black and white.
Yeah. By the 70s, the CCA relaxed, and Marvel and DC once again started going into a little bit more of a more modernish style of horror, and actual horror characters, which joined their universe, as Morbius the Living Vampire, Ghost Rider came out of that. That was kind of trying to fill the horror niche.
Yeah,
it was all demons, devils, and stuff. And Tomb of Dracula. Dracula is, of course, part of the Marvel Universe. Manga started actually outputting a little bit of horror. Horror's always been niche in manga, even to this day, really. But I guess that's a major cultural difference. For us, horror is it's always violent. There's always suspense. But we always see it as contemporary, normally, and we have all these sort of general ideas of what kind of monsters constitute horror. It's completely different culture, so very, very different. Hideshi Hino's Garo is probably the main horror title that came out. And is well known from the 70s, and that is just horrifically violent. That really is ripping out guts and all sorts. DC as well went into Weird War Tales. There was Haunted Love, and of course then they started Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
There was a big indie comic resurgence as well about this time, and that's I'm guessing it's because all the artists grew up with all the EC comics. So they started outputting a load of indie titles. And I'm just looking quickly now. I had a list of some of these because they mean nothing to me, but the names are fantastic. Skull Bogeyman, Insect Fear. That sounds interesting. I want to read that. I just can't find it anywhere.
So these are all indie published, are they?
Yeah, it was kind of when I say indie, as in none of the big publishing houses.
Yeah, so not the. I mean, you still had, it was more than the big two at least back then, wasn't it? So
I think of the list I had, some of them I actually recognise the names, and I think they might have been put together and collected at some point in comic format, because I had a load. It was about this time, I guess. We had an indoor market that was a bookshop, but also did comics. And this is actually where I read a lot of the old horror stuff. And it was old when I was reading it, early 80s, should we say. So I don't know where on earth he got it from, but they were American comics. So I guess bought cheaply at some warehouse, and they were always like dusty, and he didn't know what was in the boxes. It was like you pay so much for like 10 or 20p or something like that, probably at the time.
Random bulk,
So lots of these titles do actually seem, and they were hanging around the house for years as well, because we just had boxes of comics all over our house. But and that was kind of the 80s for me. I mean, we had, of course, ourselves, things like Misty.
Yes, that was IPC, wasn't it? Yeah.
What was the other one I was thinking of with that? There was always two. Oh, God. John did a fantastic blog piece about them recently.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things. My sister always read the same comics as me. She didn't really go for anything that was even slightly supposed to be for the female audience. And that's a shame, because I would have, looking through sort of like some of the reprint stuff now, I would have actually quite probably have a look at that. They were definitely not girly stuff. But And I always feel in our country, it always felt like you were catching up with American horror because from what was available to buy.
Yeah.
Always seemed to be like 10, 20 years old for me. It's probably might just be my experience in North Wales, I don't know. But it wasn't really till as Vertigo started getting established in the 90s, and they brought out Sandman and Hellblazer and stuff like that. It's probably because I had better access as well, to be honest, to comic shops. So there was all that kind of stuff going through. And the 90s for me was probably the real start of my love for horror comics. Because this is where I started coming across stuff like Clive Barker wrote some Hellraiser stuff.
Yeah.
And I loved Hellraiser, even though it's cheesy to look back at now. But the books are fantastic. And he really wrote good comic stuff that supported the series as well. The Nightbreed stuff wasn't so good. But the first volume, and there was like a companion book called Book of the Damned. I still got these. These are like prized, treasured possessions. The artwork is just phenomenal. It's like oil painting style in places. It's just a whole gamut of different artists. But there is so much in these books packed in. Just like, it's one of those where there's arcane symbols and everything all like cluttered around the sides of the frames. And the companion book basically either explains them or turns them into different stories. And if you like the whole Hellraiser thing, absolutely superb. And it's when I fell in love with Cthulhu mythos. I love Cthulhu, hence the Twitter name. And there are some amazing Cthulhu comics out there. There's Cthulhu Tales was very hit and miss. Very hit and miss. When it was good, it was good. When it was bad, it was bad. Fall of Cthulhu was a great run. But so many different artists have had a go at bringing the original H.P. Lovecraft stories to life. There is the Call of Cthulhu, which is been done by lots of artists, but I've got about 2 or 3 different versions of that, which are just stunning. But again, through to modern, the master of that for me is Ian J. Culbard, who I luckily met at the festival a few years ago. And he's just superb. Shadow Out of Time, the case of Charles Dexter Ward, Dream Quest of Unknown Callith. He's done some brilliant ones. I think I'm going to leave another one that he's done till last. And then just going into the modern stuff, London Horror Comic is a great little anthology. I think they're up to about Anthology 8 now. They were in the festival. Were they last year in the festival, the year before?
I definitely yes. Well, the first year I was there. That was about 3 or 4 years ago. They were definitely there. But I think they're a regular exhibitor, aren't they?
And they're great reads. It's just a whole new load of artists and everything. But they're actually really cleverly written horror stories. Again, 2 years ago, T-Pub were out there, and they've got Twisted Dark is their horror anthology. Mm-hmm. And I really like those because they seem disconnected little stories, and then you keep rereading them, and then you carry on reading further columns, and you further volumes, and you realise that actually it's an interconnected story with like a cast of hundreds and hundreds.
Cool.
You read one story and you think nothing of it, and then you go back and read volume 1, you think, oh, he's in that. Mm. Oh, he's doing that. And it's really clever.
Right.
That took me by surprise and wasn't something I really understood that well, actually.
Yeah.
Until a lot further on. I was just reading them as standalones. So, yeah, horror is... It's amazing how I'm trying... I've hopefully kept this only to what I would actually count as pure horror, rather than horror being an aspect of the comics. Because, Hellboy is obviously horror, but I think it's got too much else to it. So I've kind of gone with what I think is true eldritch horror, gothic horror. And I would mention the fantastic Penny Dreadful comics. Did you ever watch the series?
No, didn't watch the series.
Feel like I might be making a case for a later category that you have, but absolutely awesome. The comics, they're written, in line with the series. Absolutely, it's not just like somebody's bought a license and gone off and done something silly with it. But yeah, so hopefully I've kept to a strict pure horror here.
Well, it's funny because it's part of discussing genres that we've not really touched on, and that is the mashing of genres.
Yes.
Or the pairing. I mean, it's certainly something that comics lives on and thrives on. That you mentioned, Ghost Rider, which is the mashup of horror with a stunt cycler, and they've all got an action adventure heart, but they might have a crime or a horror or a twist. I mean, there's it. Same with TV shows, and movies, but there's the fact that you have to define horror in a very specific way, because we're looking at it in its sort of like baldest
purest sense.
It's an interesting part.
I tried again sci-fi horror. I could do an entire podcast on that, because that's probably my favourite. So I didn't want to go into subgenres.
No, totally.
If I can avoid it.
At this stage, it's probably perhaps something that it might be something we bear in mind for the quarterfinals. Is that kind of is there a genre that is always sort of omnipresent? Yeah, brilliant. So we do penalties after the summation, don't we?
Yes.
So, I'm forgetting the format already. Well, I am surrounded. It's when we did the list of genres that we were each getting, there was some that I remember thinking, definitely knew that sport was going to be a slight problem. Crime, instantly you think, I can bring to mind 5 straight away. But funnily enough, when it was reality documentary, I remember thinking, I'm not sure if I've got that many. I've got that many non-fiction comics. But I went to my bookshelf, and I am now, as I showed you earlier when I sat down, I'm surrounded by a good cross-section of most of the non-fiction I've got. And they kind of fall into different categories. Non-fiction's a bit easier, as we were just mentioning, in terms of the fact that it hasn't got, usually, any genre twists to a certain extent. There's biography, essentially. There's a thread of non-fiction that looks at biography. Diary short story seems to be a different one. I'll expand and give examples, but the sort of diary short story, again, it's usually biographical, but in more of a fragmented short form way. And then you've got history, or more of a journalistic look, perhaps over a period or an event rather than a life in terms of biography. And then you've got this kind of weird one which is slightly fictionalized, but with enough documentary elements. And then, of course, I suddenly realized you've got instructional. So you've got all of those comics that are actually there to instruct rather than entertain somewhat. So you've got, quite a few different subsections, really. If we go back to biography, this is the one I think that perhaps comes to mind. Certainly, I was thinking of Persepolis or some of the famous ones. I've not chosen them, a lot of the more well-known ones, partly because I haven't got them, or because I can't really talk about them in great deal in particular. But I've got there's one called Fun Home, which I found on my shelf, which I must have bought, I think probably was it about 2008 maybe. Let's have a look. I thought it would be easier when is it? 2006 by Alison Bechdel. Fun Home, the family tragic comic. Got loads of awards. It was the Time magazine's #1 book of the year. It was one of those books that transcended the genre, and people were talking about of it being a good book, despite it being a comic. The artwork's gorgeous. It's a one colour. It's a wash on a black and white, and it tells it's Alison charting her relationship with her late father, and it's an exploration of their relationship and their personal history. Distant and exacting Bruce Bechdel was an English teacher and director of the town funeral home, which Alison and her family referred to as the Fun Home. It was not until college that Alison, who had recently come out as a lesbian, discovered that her father was gay. A few weeks after this revelation, he was dead, leaving a legacy of mystery for his daughter to resolve. And it's suddenly, when you realise it's a genre that tends to examine in quite minute detail people's lives and experiences, in depending on the author, quite stark and exacting ways. The humour can come through, and the difficulty in the situation can come through. There's another book I've got called David B's Epileptic, where he talks about his relationship with his epileptic brother, and it's just, it seems to be the one that people perhaps pick up the most, the biography aspect. I think there's a relationship with non-fiction that a lot of comic artists naturally have, because it's something you will perhaps discover for yourself. Everyone, I think, whether it's a writer or artist, has written or drawn or doodled something from their own life and done some short biographical story. This sometimes grows into a full work, or into just a little diary short, which we'll get onto next. I know I've played around with it in certain strips. But the one I'm going to... I've lost it. Here we go. The one that I did pick up and thought that I would put forward is Hellraisers, which is the biography of the 4 greatest boozers of all time, which is Richard Burton, Peter O'Toole, Richard Harris, and Oliver Reed. And have you seen this?
I have actually, yeah.
It's a fantastic book. It's written by Robert Sellers and it's drawn by Jake, who I was lucky enough to meet at, he was at Thought Bubble a couple of times, but he was also at last year's SCGC. So I managed to get a rather lovely Peter O'Toole doodled in the front of mine. And it's a great book. It's 4 biographies mixed together. They're told from the point of view of the actor a lot of the time. It's a kind of Christmas Carol approach, somewhat. There's a character called Martin in it, who's a kind of wannabe Hellraiser, who becomes the sort of Dr. Watson to the reader, accompanying each of the actors back through their lives. And you see them, touring their childhoods and their rise to stardom and their chaotic personal lives. And you can imagine and some of it's already well known due to history, some of the activities that a lot of these got up to. But it's gloriously put together, really nicely drawn and staged by Robert and Jake. And it's the best representation of that kind of one that I've got, really, I think, because it's perhaps literal, but it shows what comics can do when it brings a little more staginess in some senses to it. That you've got 4 subjects, you've got framing sequences, you've got an inserted character, but it still actually is true exploration of their lives. Then we've got the reason I split it the way it was because the biography usually it's a longer form, so the Fun Home or the Epileptic or Hellraisers, it's a longer form.
You had that cover up before, didn't you?
Which
Epileptic.
One? Yes.
I could recognise it from the corner. Yes, I thought I could see it. Just the corner was floating.
Yeah. So they're big old tomes. They're long form examination of an event or a personal journey. So a lot of it is examining your relationship with a sibling or your father, or examining 4 subjects in Hellraisers. So you're with your subject longer and examining something in great depth. And I think that is different from another, perhaps more easily found non-fiction, which is I've called it diary, sort of short story. It's more sort of journaling, I suppose. It's the sense of telling a story in a much shorter way, and perhaps a story that's seen as being a little less monumental. Although, given what a creator can do in 2 or 3 pages, you can give sometimes a small encounter a great deal of weight by examining it in just 2 or 3 pages. Harvey Pekar, of course, is one of the great exponents of this with American Splendor. And he pulled on a revolving sort of list of artists that he worked with over the years. Robert Crumb, Dean Haspiel, and lots of others. He actually achieved a little bit of notoriety and fame because he would regularly appear on David Letterman's show back in the day. So he was one of the big exponents. It's a shorter form. You can get quite a lot in there. James Kolchaka did it as well with American Elf. I think at the end of the day, there's a tendency for some artists to record what's happened and get it out in a quite quick form if you're a creator, or if you can get a lot done in a shorter form. But the book in particular, I couldn't find my American Splendor. It's so annoying when we have these chats. I've got a bind up and I couldn't find it. So so many gaps have appeared in my collection and that you realise you've lent to somebody and not got. So I couldn't find my Harvey Pekar, but there was a kind of bind up that I bought on Comixology called Sew Buttons, which I bought in about 2015. I can't remember why I picked it up, but going through my Comixology account, I did find that a lot of the time I do pick up a lot of indie non-fiction just because they're really quite coolly drawn, and sometimes the subject that you naturally become drawn to is somebody with similar interests and a similar take. And So Buttons is a book that a guy called Jonathan Bayliss put together in a very Harvey Pekar way, in that he wrote all of the stories, but they're all drawn by different assortment of comic artists, not particularly well-known ones either, so more old undergroundy sort of style. Fred Hembeck, do you remember Fred Hembeck? He used to draw the horror humour strips. He's drawn a couple in there. Noah Van Sciver, Rick Parker, and it's really interesting. Very short, sometimes 2-3 pages, autobiographical. It's about a guy who has worked, I think, mainly in the entertainment industry. He's been a producer. Nowadays he's working on an American TV network. But along the way, he writes about his pop culture memories of his favourite movies. So he talks about King Kong, movie marathons on the TV. He talks about encounters with Robert Redford when he worked at the Sundance Movie Channel. He talks about stories about just going for breakfast with his dad or his uncles, and memories of Vietnam. Really very different, subjects to be all in one book, but really nicely told, having a different point of view on different things from somebody who can put together a strong theme over 2 or 3 pages. Really enjoyed that. A nice bit of what I described earlier as fictionalized non-fiction. I was thinking about including, where does From Hell fit in non-fiction? It's based in reality, but there's a lot added to it to give it interest. And
there is, but I think From Hell, technically, if you've got a story and it's fictionalizing elements within purely to keep the plot going, but it's kind of trying to tell something historical or factual. But I think From Hell does go beyond that. It's got a very particular theory it's trying to prove.
But the way it tells that theory brings in such a lot of history as well.
It does. It's very historically accurate.
My favourite bit of From Hell is almost the kind of potted history of London that you get. The fact that he brings in Hawksmoor, and he might claim that what Hawksmoor as an architect was doing with buildings and with London, what he was doing was had some greater goal to it. But in terms of you actually learning about how London changed or grew, or where it came from, so there's certainly some bits in From Hell that I almost is what I read it for. I kind of don't read it for the Jack the Ripper bits, really. I just love it.
I mean, some of the autobiographical stuff you're talking about, the best part of those that I read, it's when it's around something significant historical, and it gives you the social history side of it that you don't read about. And wow, the research into From Hell, I think that satisfies that for me as well. Like you're saying, it's all the stuff you don't really... It would be so dry to read in a textbook kind of way. But when it's in a story, it kind of comes to life a bit more.
Totally. And I think that, one of my final one definitely touches on that. Mouse is one of the most, famous. I made a conscious choice. It's like Persepolis. There's some ones that hit. And I think non-fiction tends to jump out of the little genre trap that comics is. It tends to jump out a little bit more often than your Dark Knights and your Watchmens, And I think because it is seen to be perhaps the most serious part of most non-genre, which in itself, I think, genre can have its problems. So, but even Mouse has, an element of layering between you and the story. It's based on a true story, but there have been some shortening or some fictionalization involved. And The Dreamer, which is another book that it's a short graphic novella written by Will Eisner, and it says on the back, well, not an autobiography in the classic sense. The Dreamer takes place in a time through which the author lived. In an attempt to confirm the aspirations of the dreamers among us, Will Eisner deals with people and scenes that have the feel and quality of reality. It's a story that should satisfy those curious about life in and around a typical comic book studio of the middle 1930s. Eisner says it's intended as a kind of graphical historical novel set in the primordial dawn of the comic book industry. And it's fantastic. It's obviously drawn, as you'd expect, impeccably by Eisner. It's gorgeous to look at, flows wonderfully, and you can recognize the characters and who they are meant to be. There's, when Jack Kirby arrives, that it's Jack Kirby, so there's been a shortening, perhaps again in that Mouse way, of tales, and some of the names have been changed to protect the innocent, but it's a very autobiographical, like it says, depiction of what must have been, cracking, both difficult and exhilarating period to live through. The 1930s, middle 1930s, where comics suddenly boomed, is an amazing period, incredibly interesting. That's a fantastic.
I still haven't read it. You've recommended it to me before, actually. This must have come up. Did it come up in conversation, or was it a Mutterdowns?
That's part of my problem as well. Half the time I'm thinking, have I spoken about this before? The
problem is we chat for an hour before we even start recording. That's my main problem.
It's part of the problem, but it's also you have so many chats. You're talking about comics all the time. Did I talk online about this or not? But The Dreamer, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, also the other bit that Will Eisner's done. He's written his Vietnam experiences, of course. Day in Vietnam, which is another cracking example of him taking. It's a little closer to home, I think. He's not quite put the layer in between on that, but that kind of fictionalized non-fiction that is, has a. I always think of it as kind of like a layer on top of it. And then, just as you were saying, that historical or sort of journalistic approach, like you said, to an event, but also giving the surroundings perhaps some sort of understanding of what else was going on at the time. The comic book history guys have got brilliant range of books. They've just kickstarted. This is Fred Van Lent and Ryan Dunleavy on the art. They've done so many comic book histories. I have mentioned them before. I use them on my profiles of, I think, Jack Kirby and I think Steve Ditko. They really do that kind of contraction so well, of being able to pick the exact moments, people, characters that you need to be informed about. So when they do the comic book history of comics, first of all, I think they tend to divide their subject in 5 or 6 comics. So they're having to choose a sort of theme or period of years. And then chart you through the events brilliantly and so entertainingly. I absolutely love them. They just did a Kickstarter on the comic book history of animation, which just recently finished. And and I've backed that. They've also done the comic book history of philosophers. I think slightly different team. I don't think Ryan Dunleavy drew it, but they've done the comic book history of presidents. So, you know, it's taking that sort of non-fiction and giving it it's not so much easy to read, but just making it, you know, really good fun. Mm-hmm. There's on the completely opposite. I went to my shelf and I found I've got Brought to Light, a graphic docudrama. 30 years of drug smuggling, arms deals, and covert operations that robbed America and betrayed the Constitution. And I can't remember when it came out. Published by Titan, this one is, but it must be a sort of, I think, a UK version perhaps. But it's about the Iran-Contra scandal.
So I'd be really interested in that, actually.
Yeah. And it's right. Listen, written by Alan Moore, and it's drawn by Bill Sienkiewicz. It's actually a double book, and the other side is Joyce Brabner and Thomas Yates. So it's a really, I mean, you don't really get flip books much nowadays, so it's cool for that. But you know, you can imagine this was what we're looking at now. 89, originally published by Eclipse, and so 89, Bill Sienkiewicz in 89. I mean, he's doing what, Electro Assassin around this time, something like that. So it's absolutely, you know, incredible Sienkiewicz at the height. And yeah, talking about Oliver North. The scandal in Iran, Nicaragua, 30 years, a secret team of US military and CIA officials acting both officially and on their own have waged secret wars, toppled governments, trafficked in drugs, assassinated political enemies, stolen from the US government, and subverted the will of the Constitution, the Congress, and the American people. So, you know, something that we lived through that was as big as, what, the Bay of Pigs? You know, something like that. It was a massive.
I've read so many books on the subject. I've genuinely never heard of that before.
I haven't, and I don't know if it's still in print. I think I managed to pick it up from an eBay sale. Somebody in my local comic shop had put a post in the shop saying he was selling a lot of elements of his collection.
Wow.
And this, I'd never heard of it, never seen it, and this was one of the things I managed to pick up. But there's a brilliant character that's sort of a very jazzy version of a kind of corrupt American eagle that's got this kind of very 80s pink checkerboard suit and smokes a cigar. It's absolutely superb. But yeah, I mean, if you can find that anywhere online, that's incredibly interesting. Where We Live. I've got a book called Where We Live, which is a benefit for the survivors of the Las Vegas shooting, which was published by Image Comics. And this does have much more of a powerhouse assemblage. Again, real different collection of artists and, of course, different voices and personalities that have lived through the same event. So different perspectives, different political, outlooks. But you've got people like Nick Pitara. You've got, Mignola did pin-up, I think. Gail Simone, Ivan Brandon, Paul Azacito, Sean Phillips, Cameron Stewart. So, and a lot of indie and alt comics sort of personalities. And yeah, it was really interesting. I was glad I picked it up. It talks about, the atrocity. It talks about the aftermath. Oh yeah, Kurt Busiek and Andrew McLean did a story in there, and yes, so many different voices. That's when you get a good non-comics anthology, the different voices that come across from people's pens. But the clear winner in this section is a book called The Art of Charlie Chan Hock Chai, which, just what you were talking about. This is a book which is talking about the history of Singapore, which I didn't know, and I didn't know I would ever be interested. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, oh really? What else you got? But well, I'll read the inside of the front cover. Meet Charlie Chan Hock Chai. Now in his early 70s, Chan has been making comics in his native Singapore since 1954, when he was a boy of 16. As he looks back on his career over 5 decades, we see his stories unfold before us in a dazzling array of art styles and forms, their development mirroring the evolution in the political and social landscape of his homeland and of the comic book medium itself. With the art of Charlie Chan Hock Chai, Sonny Liu has drawn together a myriad of genres to create a thoroughly ingenious and engaging work where the line between truth and construct may sometimes be blurred, and where the story told is always enthralling, bringing us on a uniquely moving, funny and thought-provoking journey through the life of an artist and the history of a nation. So he has joined those two things together, and it is one of my favourite books, of all time. It's got a real pride of place on my bookshelf because it does tell the story of two friends that want to tell stories, and over the years have, there's a manga style character that they first come up with, and it's like a giant robot that they have some success with. They move towards a more sort of the style looks more like the sort of Eagle of the 50s, but it's more of a kind of sci-fi dystopian sort of empire story. And then it moves through a pulpy character called Roachman, and you have intercut stories of the biographical story of the two artists. The new creations that they come up with are reflections of the social sort of reflection of the time that the country's going through. And then there's the most amazing Walt Kelly style sort of political parodies where the members of the government are included in the stories as different characters, and it's just gorgeous. It's just absolutely mesmerizing. Everything is done, so well. The parodies of the different artwork and the allusions and the similarities that you can draw between what the country's going through, and gets it nailed so well. But it's just superb. And then one last one, which I did forget in the biography as well, of course, Eddie Campbell. If nobody has read Ed Alec series that he did, which is a series of autobiographical books, Eddie was the artist on From Hell, and he wrote a series of autobiographical books called, they were all under the Alec sort of subtitle, Alec the King Canute Crowd, and he did one called Alec How to Be an Artist, which is a sort of potted history of Alec, of Eddie's journey as a comic artist from his early days at comic marts in London to, I suppose, pretty much it takes you through from hell. I think it maybe it ends sort of mid-90s, maybe. It takes in the formation, possibly the end of Tundra, which happened with all of the Teenage Mutant Ninja money. There's a fantastic sort of list of what he considers, some of the best graphic novels at the end. But that was, I just forgot to put that in the right section. But Eddie Campbell's Alec, How to Be an Artist.
You've definitely found a subgenre of comics about comics.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, talk about, it is funny. And I had a cracking time going through some of these. It's every time we do one of these, you pull some books off the shelf and you think, well, that's not going back till I've read it again.
I had a small pile as well. Yeah.
Every one that comes off, and you're remembering reading them for the first time, and it's like, oh yeah, this is the book with this bit in, and then you go looking for that bit. I mean, there's some great bits in Alec, How to Be an Artist, because it's his sort of history and progression to become the artist, the comic artist he becomes. But it's also he sort of will follow the progress of the graphic novel, and its growth through sort of the 80s, and it becoming a thing. Right, it's a bit messy, but the last section of non-fiction, of course, is instructional, which I was quite late to get to. But of course, one of the best non-fiction books, comic books, is Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, which is a mesmerizing, piece of work. He takes you through the definition, the construction, the vocabulary. There's a little bit of history in there. The stylings. One of my favourite bits is he's done a kind of pyramid of different artists' styles, which he manages to. He places different comic artists at different points, so you can actually see where they relate to each other in terms of the bottom line is reality, where perhaps the artist who's photorealistic would be at one end and then ultimately simplified at the other. So somebody like Bone or Jeff Smith at the other. Yeah. And then right up the top, you've got what he calls the picture plane or abstraction. So somebody like Sienkiewicz or who's he got as number one? Mary Fleener, Dave McKean, people like that. So where everything becomes a little more abstracted. And then he places, people, so Jim Lee or Hugo Pratt or Will Simpson, and he places them. Sergio Aragonés, where on Hergé's Tintin, Will Eisner, where on this John Buscema, where would they sit within this combination of reality, simplification, and abstraction? So it's absolutely bonkers.
Where was this when we had to discuss Belgian comics?
Well, it's got an explanation of everything probably to do with comics. He talks about colour, talks about the style of line that you can use. The bit on time, I remember reading and particularly enjoying, where you've got this, the relationship between space and time, which is quite unique to comics in terms of how you can imply the passing of time just by changing the size of the panel that you use in the story. And there are lots of other instructional comics, comics and sequential art by Will Eisner. There's War. He did 2 more follow-ups, Scott McCloud as well, reinventing comics, making comics. I've got a comic downstairs, I think it's by David Chelsea, which is basically teaching you perspective through comics. So it's an amazing thing in itself to use to pass on information. So
I started on manga when I was in uni, and I was given a bunch of manga to read, and she gave me a book which was How to Read Manga. It was a manga comic book, How to Read Manga, and it's just the Eastern version of that, basically. Yeah. But manga is a language. It's ridiculous. And I've never found this book again. If you Google these kind of things, there's millions, but I've never recognised the cover of the one I had because it was superb. It's like this squiggle above the head actually means this shape of the face warns you it will be villainous. This elongation of font is actually the timings of the noise that's being made, and it's just like, whoa, it's a proper language. It's such a history. And again, that was in comic book format. You've only just made me think of that, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot in there, that you think you understand, and but you can't read everything. There were books I bought because of this book, and it's usually the case. Lots of comics lead to other comics and other books.
Yeah.
And it did mention, I think it mentions Hicksville in here by Dylan Horrocks. And it mentions, I hadn't read a lot of manga, I don't think, when I'd read this book either. So there were lots of discussions of different types of European comics and comics from other countries that I didn't know about or think about.
You mentioned Surplus and Mouse were the 2 instant things I thought of.
Do you know?
There was one that I thought of only during this, and I've not read it actually, but I keep meaning to buy a copy of Mary and Brian Talbot's Rain, all about the Kendal floods, as it's my hometown. Okay. It's kind of
yes. Once you start down it, I mean, Brian Talbot did a book called Alice in Sunderland.
Oh yes,
which I remember being, incredibly absorbing. That there is something about non-fiction in comic form that can just really pull you in and actually take you and get you involved in what you're reading about in an entirely different way from reading a book about it.
Yeah.
Oh, so there we go. That was, I mean, it was really just a random tour through my bookshelf. It's the weird thing. You can't really do a history of non-fiction, in the same way that you can crime comics or history comics.
It's kettle of fish, isn't it?
It's something that is probably the first thing that anyone ever did with word and pictures is, write about their experience or, how the hunt went, or how the Egyptians collected reeds by, all of those historical forms of comics are the basis of non-fiction comics, really. Right. Penalties.
Are we to the penalty shootout then? So just to remind people of the format, we're going to just now take it in turns in a sort of a tit for tat penalty shootout. We're going to each say a recommended read, something that we think's really good about our genre, just a sort of like a simple one-line explanation to sell it to you, and we kind of do a vote on each one. So there's 5 rounds of it, and that's how we determine the winner for the next. So, first penalty shootout. Shall I start and then we'll take it alternate?
Okay.
I will go with one I mentioned already. Twisted Dark, a seemingly random horror anthology from TPub that on repeated reading becomes a more connected tale with a cast of thousands.
Versus So Buttons, a real slice of life comic book with added comic and monster talk. So I think T-Pub might have to have that one. I did like the explanation of that dawning realization of connections, because that in itself is quite a creepy thing.
It is, because they only release them every now and then. And I think the first one was actually donated to the podcast show.
Right.
And that's what started me on it. So, of course, it's half a year until you pick up another one to read.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, you have to be coincidentally be into it to read a few or remind yourself of previous stories, whatever. And it's just pure luck. But yeah, no, I'll go for that one as well. So we've got a win for horror on the first penalty shootout. I am going to stick to my list that I actually wrote. I'm not going to change it. It's just that my final, hopefully winning penalty choice, I now realise is really controversial.
Oh,
we'll come to that. Okay, second one. You go
second
first.
One is the comic book history of comics or animation or philosophers. Like your mum sneaking veg into your shepherd's pie, these books get you educated while laughing your ass off.
And I've gone for Gideon Falls, an everyday backwater town beset by mysterious deaths, and an obsessed man seeking answers to the mysteries of the Black Barn. That's a pure teaser for you, that one. It really doesn't tell you anything about it.
No, I think they gave the first issue away for free on that. I don't know if it's still
free
available.
Currently,
free.
actually.
Yeah.
It's one of the, I'm sure it's out there for free.
Well, a lot of the image ones are all free as well, because I think they've added more because of the lockdown as well and self-isolation. But I have to go for... I'm going for comic book history here because the coverage. Nice. I've got to win one.
Right. Third penalty shootout. Fatale. Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips gives us the tale of a hunted ageless femme fatale cursing and bending the minds of men to do her will.
That's a dirty trick.
Yeah.
Understanding comics. Scott McCloud takes the comic form apart piece by piece and then puts it back together all in a comic. But that comic isn't Fatale.
Yeah, just to make that clear, I was well aware that was a dirty trick.
Ooh, classic.
Another for horror.
I keep thinking of all of the comics that, now is the time for an epic reread.
Of things, yeah.
Of certain comics. And there's certain comics that have never been filed, in the sense that they've never made it into a long box that is then put somewhere where long boxes go. So I've got various, they're not all in one place for me. So I've got some at the bottom of the wardrobe, I've got some under the stairs, I've got, some in the workroom. So some comics never get filed away. And that means that they're just, they're always there. They're always, yeah. And I've got a filing cabinet that I use, a bedside cabinet. One of those drawers is all just pretty much Fatale or Brubaker Phillips comics. And then there's another one that's mostly sort of Mignola. I think Hellboy in Hell's in one of those. And BPRD, of course.
Plus the dirty trick aspect, because, yes, I'm well aware of your little cupboard.
Yeah.
I think you've gone through the contents of it before now.
Oh, man. I'm getting so old. Just repeating myself. Am I going first on the next one?
Yes.
Hellraisers is as chaotic, funny, and charming as the subjects of the story.
Mine is At the Mountains of Madness. The doomed Miskatonic University Arctic expedition finds ancient ruins, alien artifacts, and mutant penguins.
Yeah, I've got that. Yeah, that's a good one. Is it No Brow, that one? Oh, not.
It's the Iron J. Colbard one.
Oh, okay. Maybe check who's drawn.
Minimalistic one. It's very strange. It looks almost at points. It looks like it's kind of got a Tintin-y style.
Yes, I think I have got that one. I'll have to look up. I don't think I knew his name before. But...
I'm a bit stuck on this one because I have read Hellraisers, and it's a kind of I don't know. It's just one of those historical things I found really interesting. I'm actually torn. I'm not sure if I've got a vote on this one.
Well, that's all right because does that mean if you call that a draw, it doesn't really affect stuff, does it?
No, although we could end up with a draw overall, but we'll see.
That might be interesting.
Because it means I'm first, doesn't it? So my number one is From Hell.
Ah, that's cool.
Which has now appeared for both of us in the same genre.
Okay.
A truly horrific tome of horror from Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell, exploring the identity and psychology of Jack the Ripper and the Whitechapel murders.
And I've got The Art of Charlie Chan Hock Chai. If you read one book I've ever talked about, read this one. So is that another draw?
It could be, because I'm backing From Hell and you're backing yours.
Yeah.
But okay.
So if they're both draws, that leaves horror.
That's a win for horror.
Horror. There you go.
2-1. Out of 5 penalties. Horror is the official winner. Cool. Which is probably good, actually, because it's a far bigger genre to talk about if we lump this on somebody else to talk about.
But we do have to bear that in mind, don't we? Because there is an element of, I kind of shot my load on non-fiction there.
I think we know what you mean. Right. Okay. So that leaves me with Post-Apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
And you with?
TV film. Now, I think it's me to go first, isn't it?
I think it is.
So, TV film. We realised in chatting before the programme that we'd kind of got different ideas of what this was. So, and I've slightly cheated as well, just to give more options for people to, in this case, watch things. So it could have been comic adaptations of TV shows or films, but I've taken it as comics that had TV versions in particular. So it's kind of, I've gone the other way. So it's comics that have been adapted into TV shows. And I've concentrated on TV mainly because we did do a whole Mutterdowns on movies.
We did, yes. And I think that yours is the better call as well.
Well, the other side, as we keep saying, is to give people potential options of stuff that they haven't caught, didn't know about, or just needed reminding of. So because we're doing it about comics, I've kind of flipped it, and I'm talking about TV shows that are available. They're all available on Netflix, I think. Well, I'll say who they're available on as we get to each one. But you've got the potential, if you like the TV show, to then go and read the source material, which in some cases can be quite substantial. And again, I've not done a history, and these will be my penalty shootouts, but that's all right. Let's start with Umbrella Academy, which I'm sure I've mentioned before. I've got waitress service, thank you. Look at that for lockdown.
Oh, now I want to get one.
I've just had
a large spear has just appeared in the screen in front of me.
Isn't it? Obviously, we've hit the yard. The yard arm has been raised. I'm saluting as we speak. Oh yeah, it's a glass of I think that's OSB, old style bitter from Thomas Watkins, local brewery that saved our life and does delivery. So, so yeah, Umbrella Academy. I mean, I'm a massive fan of Gabriel Barr. Love his work, and Umbrella Academy fits him to a T. The characters are bizarre. It's a dysfunctional family of superheroes. It's X-Men-y in the sense that it's dysfunctional. There's a school, but it's taken that little bit further. The comic is written by Gabriel Gerard Way, and it just takes the whacked out weirdness that little bit further. The powers are stranger, and there's now 3 different volumes. The last just finished end of last year. Yeah, I don't think it was published at Hotel Oblivion, and there's been some big chunks of time in between each volume.
Yeah.
But read comics, great. Really can change the genres inside the comic at ridiculous speed. The last one was really ramped up, sort of interstellar superheroics, really, which hadn't really been covered.
Wasn't part of it to begin with at all, was it?
No. The first one was quite subdued for its subject matter. You'd have flashbacks to earlier missions that were a little bit sort of, like I say, X-Men and New Mutants. But the actual stories were quite sometimes slowly paced, a little more of a crime sort of story. And that got a little more espionage-y then with the second volume. Different elements of different volumes made it into the TV show. TV show we watched as a family and we all really enjoyed. It wasn't as weird and wacky and out there as much as I wanted it to be, but it did include some of the important elements that you really wanted them to. I don't want to give too much away in terms of this particular bit, because you want to watch it without knowing what's going on. But Umbrella Academy has, I think, a season of about 10 episodes on Netflix, and if you enjoy that, you can go on to read another 3 volumes, which are readily available, still in print. The next one is a show again on Netflix. Now, because we've been in lockdown, we do watch a lot of things as a family. We do pretty much enjoy most programs that we choose to watch. If it gets voted down, you can go off and watch it on your own. But that does now mean that my daughters are 17 and 20. Or Daisy will be 20 this year. So they are coming into their own adult, area of liking what they like themselves. So they bring TV shows to the table now themselves. So they will suggest ones. And this was one that I hadn't been aware of, didn't know of its comic book pedigree. And it's a series called I'm Not Okay With This, which is on Netflix. Apart from the fact I could never remember its title, I found the title ridiculous to remember. And we would call it I'm Not I've forgotten what it's called. I knew it started with I, but it would be like, oh, are we watching? What are we watching? Oh, we're watching. I've got no idea. So it didn't stick, but it's based on a graphic novel, Fantagraphics, 2017, I think, quite a recent one, and it's angsty high school student Sid. She's very awkward. Her dad's died, which seems to be a recurring theme in a lot of these. It does center around American high school hierarchy, power struggles. It's a little bit Breakfast Clubby at times in terms of, that kind of jock, criminal, geek aspect. There's a family drama element to it. There's a sexual awakening, and all the while she's trying to cope with her frustrations, her increasingly sort of angry emotions, and her budding superpowers. So there is an element of all of these things colliding. It's really well done. I didn't know that I wanted to watch it till we started watching it. It literally was a kind of, oh, go on then. I wouldn't have chosen to watch it myself, but really enjoyed it. And funnily enough, the one we watched after it was called End of the Effing World, which is another. It's on Netflix, but the second season's on Channel 4, I think. So they're both available to stream. When I started to watch this one after the other one, I knew this was based on a graphic novel as well. But it's got a much... Well, first of all, I was surprised because I expected it to be set in America like the first one. And it's not. Very broad English accents. But it's got this strange visual mix.
I know exactly what you mean. It's weird, isn't it?
There's a few of these shows now, when they start, you're not quite sure not only what country it's set in, but what time period. And it's a real mix of the fact that certain fashions have come back or are deliberately put into play by the costume department. So, the kids are wearing stuff that, you've seen photos of your mum and dad wearing in the 70s or whatever. And then the cars that they're using are incredibly old. So it threw me a little bit when we were even watching.
But you've got a central location being like a diner.
Yes.
And there's backcountry roads that look American.
Totally.
It is very strange and anachronistic, but I kind of liked it.
Yeah. I didn't know if they'd done it deliberately because, you could worry that it smacks of homogenization. You could worry that, everything's getting stirred into a pot. I mean, my daughters use American words for things that, that we don't, but because so much culture is being spilled around. So there is an element that worries me that that they've got to attract as many people from as many different markets as possible to watch it. So is it a conscious decision in that, or is it stylistic choice?
I thought that to begin with because I watched it last year. The first series, there's a bit in school, isn't there? And I seem to remember there was some
in school.
Weird sort of Americanish, high schoolish.
Yes,
but then
they've got lockers for a start. They've got lockers.
Then that's kind of happening over here anyway.
Well, you see, I don't know because
I think it's conscious though, because then you've got the house is a very. It's like a 70s sort of expensive design house. I haven't got the architectural language for that. Sorry. But again, that's an anachronism with everything else that's going on.
Mm.
I think it is conscious, just to mess.
I think so. It's just there are a lot. There are some that I haven't mentioned, but they all start in a similar way with a similar vein. They start with one or two are a family moving to another place and starting at the new school, getting the hierarchy, involved. October Faction, which has got a season on Netflix, starts in a very similar way to another one I'm going to get to, Lock and Key. They have these elements of, they've all got these very similar elements of fitting in, like I mentioned, murdered father, and this style sort of element as well. Sex Education was one we watched the other day. Same kind of thing. I didn't know what sort of time period it was until somebody got a mobile phone out or mentioned the internet, or but they look fantastic. They're all incredibly well told. End of the Effing World is it's described as a dark dramedy, but it's wickedly funny. Back in the day, you'd have just called it a dark comedy because the darkness would have brought the drama. But it is really, really funny, and it centres on two sort of emotionally damaged teens, James and Alyssa, and somehow they connect, and they connect in a very blunt kind of, I think she walks up to him and she says, right, you're going to be my friend kind of thing, after she's just smashed a phone to separate her from that kind of peer group. And what she doesn't know is that James believes he's a sociopath.
Well, psychopath, because he's
and he spends pretty much the first series, doesn't he, plotting to murder her.
It's a cool concept, isn't it?
Oh, it's so well done. And I remember watching, and lots of these, I didn't know I wanted to watch them, and they come to you cold, and the girls have said they've watched it, and they're willing to watch it again. If you're willing to watch something again, then you know that the person really enjoyed it, and there is enough in there for them to enjoy a sort of central, a second viewing. And I have to say, I was completely won over. When it started, it really was a case of like, flipping heck, who are these two? What sort of characters am I going to be following? They seemed blunt and quite unattractive. But, man, they just were funny. And by the end of the first season, I couldn't wait to watch the second. And you generally cared for them by the end of it. You understood where they'd come from, what they were dealing with, and it was really well done, really well told. Some nice little snappy, one of those series that can tell you something about a character just with one cut to them and a reaction shot, or he'd be talking about his dad.
They're good actors, aren't they? Both
really well done.
Excellent.
So, End of the Effing World. Can't recommend that one highly enough. And then the second sort of coincidence to it all, when I was doing the research, what I laughingly refer to as the research for today, is I found out that I knew they were both based on comics, but I didn't know they were both based on graphic novels by the same guy.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a guy called Charles Forsman, and he did I'm Not Okay for Fantagraphics in 2017. I think End of the Effing World is earlier, and it's 2013. So I looked him up, saw a quick interview with him. He seems to have quite cartoony, it's terrible to say simple, cartoony style. One of the characters, I think it was Sid, had a kind of Popeye-ish sort of styling. But also, I then realised that I'd heard of some of his other stuff, because it's also great to see what else they've been doing. And he did a paperback called Slasher, which I heard Tony Esmond talking about on the Awesome Comics podcast. So he's still producing, and it seems to have quite an edgy, I think Tony was talking about the Slash had quite an outsider vibe. And he obviously likes these characters, it seems, that are marginalised or, separated or socially isolated. So there's another angle to that. But End of the Effing World, I'm definitely going to be reading both of those books, because particularly End of the Effing World, because I really enjoyed that one.
Second series because of fan reaction.
Really?
Yeah, it was filmed. I might be wrong with this. I've got a vague memory that the first series was filmed but not actually used for a bit.
Okay.
And that's why, even though the second series seemed like a close follow-up, they've grown quite a bit, haven't they? The two actors.
Yeah, yeah.
In between, she was in Penny Dreadful third season.
Right.
Yeah, I think there was something. But there was quite a big sort of fan push to get it done. So it was lucky.
So has it been on Netflix for a while, or did it go on Netflix because it had a second season?
No, I don't think so. I didn't know it was on Netflix, to be honest. I caught up with it on catch up on Awful. And then I caught up because the second series came out, but I don't think there was that long between them being released as such.
Right. I was lucky that it was Daisy that had watched it before, but absolutely.
No good shout from her.
Yeah, it really was. So, and then the next one, available again on Netflix, another new one. This was something that we'd watched as a family while Daisy was at university. So again, there's no age. There's a bit of murder. There's a bit of murder, yeah. But I suppose you'd have to look it up on a website. But for us, it was perfect. I think if you've got kids in comp, sort of O levels sort of level, I think you'd be fine. But this is Lock and Key, which is an American comic book series written by Joe Hill, son of Stephen King. I bet he hates it when people say that. Illustrated by Gabriel Rodriguez, published by IDW, currently, I think, on 6 volumes. So there's a good deal to catch up with if you enjoy the series. The series is completely good enough for us to watch twice. So because Daisy missed it when she was in uni, we've added this to our family watching list so that she can see it, because we did enjoy it so much. We thought it was really well done. Funnily enough, we watched the trailer for Lock and Key and October Faction, and me and Non loved the look of October Faction, and we were really a little bit kind of, oh my god, that Lock and Key looks terrible. They didn't seem they chose a lot of the visuals centered on some of the more fantastic sort of elements without giving you an idea of what really was the core of it, which is this family moving to an ancestral home where there's 3 kids. There's a young lad and an older brother and sister, and they're obviously going through their trials and tribulations and finding their place within the hierarchies at school. And yes, yeah, one's a bit more popular, and then one's a little bit more of a more of the awkward. I mean, it really is quite formulaic when you watch, because October Faction had pretty much the same, jock brother, slightly weird sister who enjoyed drawing and was more withdrawn. But they moved to this new home, so they've got the different surroundings to discover, but also within the house, they discover that there are these magical keys that unlock secrets and sometimes abilities and powers. And it really does pull you in. There's a great arc to work out what's going on. So there's a bit of detective work for you as a viewer as well as the kids. it gets just the right information across that you're not frustrated, but you want to know what's going on. The kids aren't annoying. In fact, just the opposite. I thought that the younger lad, Bodhi, could have been, quite
absolutely.
Terrifyingly
They skipped all of that completely.
Really likable. So that helps that you do actually root for them. That was one of the problems with October Faction, why it didn't make my list, apart from the fact that, unfortunately, it's got cancelled after one season. So, yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's what I read.
Oh, God, I don't know how to break that to Alison. That was her favourite
series
we've watched recently.
Do you know, we enjoyed the opening scene and the first couple of episodes I was in, but I was fading by the end, and this didn't happen with Lock and Key, and that's for me why Lock and Key became a recommendation over October Faction.
Oh, so hang on, can I just clarify? Is it October Faction that's got cancelled?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Not
we haven't watched that yet. I thought you meant
okay.
G.
No.
Like, how could that get cancelled?
No.
But then I remember Firefly.
Well, exactly. We watched the trailers and we liked, and we watched them both very close to each other. So I used them both for comparisons. There was lots quite similar in terms of setup and in terms of this family secret and this reveal. But, and I'm not going into spoilers. By the end of it, I was so much more invested in Lock and Key and really happy to stay with it than I was with October Faction, which was funny because I had chosen to watch that over this one. So, I mean, because I'm talking about it, I suppose it is a recommendation in some ways. And there is a comic that you can read. Is it? No, it's not. Is that Rick Remender? I think it might be. I haven't read the comic, so anyway, I'm confusing matters. Lock and Key, really good, and another avenue to enjoy it, as well as it's been available digitally. Have a look to see if your local library does a digital reading app, because in Swansea, our local library has a service where you can download magazines and comics through a service called RB Digital. And there's a lot of really good comics on there. There's a lot of Dark Horse stuff. You basically check it out for 30 days. So you can't keep it, but it's more than enough time. There's a lot of Marvel on there. I don't know how much DC, but there's a lot of Avengers and Spider-Man. But there's Hellboy, BPRD, and Lock and Key. So coming to the end of the TV show, I was able to fire up the library app and start reading the graphic novels, which has been really interesting to see, the changes, to see the differences they've gone for, straight off the bat, there's a completely different. The first key that's found is very different, and the character designs, of course, are very different. But I'm really looking forward to getting ahead now on the series. So I'll probably have read all of the graphic novels by the time the TV show comes back.
My sister's a massive fan of the comics.
Mm.
I found the original comic, right? And all I did was I read a review of it, and I thought, oh, she'd like that, and I bought it her. So I've carried on buying her all the collected books. I've ended up not reading them because I've been buying them her. I saw the TV series, fell in love with it. I know roughly a lot about the comics, but she's not watching the series until she's finished the comics. The comics are coming to an end once she's got the final one. Then I'll get then she'll finish. She'll give me the comics, and then she'll watch the series on Netflix. But I do know, because the comics are a lot more Cthulhu mythos, aren't they?
Well, the first one's called Welcome to Lovecraft.
Yeah.
So I haven't got that far in it yet, to be honest.
Okay.
But that was one of the.
I'm waiting for her to pass them over, basically.
Yeah. But and you don't get that. I don't know I don't know yet. I don't want to give anything away about the TV show, and I haven't got very far in the books, but I'm enjoying both. Yeah. So, and then the last one, which is a nod to, well, not just families with kids, but this one's suitable for much younger audiences. Disney Plus, which recently came out, is primarily useful for watching The Mandalorian, which is another family favourite. But amongst all of the backlog of stuff on there, there are a lot of Pixar shorts, which are very good fun, and there's a lot of animation. And it made me reconnect with one of my favourite cartoons of recent years. And probably, out of all of the... We've talked about this before, about how Marvel and DC, obviously DC being owned by Warner Brothers, they had that whole built-in mythos of the animation studios and the obvious talent that is connected through their parent company. And Marvel hasn't always had the best animation.
No.
There were a few sort of TV movies that were really quite good. I think there was a Wolverine versus, was it Thor one? Was it Thor versus Hulk? Thor versus Wolverine, I think. Oh, Hulk versus where Hulk fought one and then the other. But the TV shows, some of the Spider-Man ones are quite good. But this was a cartoon, came out in 2010, and it was called Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes. I think it might have fallen beneath a lot of people's radars because it was, I think in this country it was on Disney XD.
Right.
Me and the girls looked into watching it. It was just on the cusp of the movies starting to come out. So Marvel itself still had a lot of freedom in terms of being able to, almost in charge of their own product, and certainly in animation and TV terms. And what's good is that it's not got too movie-fied at this point, so still takes a lot of its cues from the comics. And the style is gorgeous as well. So a lot of them can fall down with them. It's not got to the 3D stage yet. It's still 2D. And it starts with a storyline reminiscent to the sort of early Bendis Avengers books, where a shed load of dangerous supervillains are mysteriously freed en masse. And the first team is, pure old school Avengers. The first team is Iron Man, Ant-Man, the Hulk, Thor, and the Wasp. Captain America joins later, and you get Black Panther and Hawkeye joining. Hawkeye and Hulk develop a really nice sort of buddy sort of banter, which is funny. And it's later on, you get so many characters introduced that it almost feels like a kind of Marvel Universe cartoon. You've got the Fantastic Four popping in late in the season 2, I think. You've got Guardians of the Galaxy, Beta Ray Bill, Miss Marvel. I think Wolverine might be in there. So it becomes much more of a kind of Marvel cartoon rather than an Avengers cartoon. And it takes its lead from, like I say, the comics. You've got the Kree getting involved, Doctor Doom. It's really good fun. It's a really good fun Marvel cartoon. It's great for geeks and nerds, but if you have got kids, the girls loved it as well. So it is good if you're a nerd parent to sit down and watch with them. It's a really, really good cartoon that's quite faithful. They do start to bring in some of the Marvel sort of ultimate touches later on. I think Nick Fury starts to look more like movie Nick Fury. I don't know if he ever appeared as one and was changed, but it's definitely sort of Samuel Jackson, Nick Fury.
Right.
But most of the other stuff, it's purely, it's purely comic based.
Oh, that's a good recommendation. I'm so behind on the animation of DC and Marvel, to be honest. DC always seems steps ahead. But no, this sounds like something I'd quite like. It just sounds like a whole sort of Marvel-tastic get-together sort of thing, which I'd probably,
Yeah. I mean, I looked through Disney Plus, and, I did think, right, there's not a lot to hold me here once Mandalorian's finished. But I think there might even be a few episodes of this that I didn't catch first time round. Because some of the, when I did a quick read-up, I was trying to remember, the read-up I read said Heroes for Hire was in it. And I was like, I don't remember seeing Heroes for Hire in it. So I'm gonna go back for a rewatch before I bin it before Mandalorian's finished.
I mean, there is stuff that, they will be hosting the new Marvel series, won't they?
Yes.
When they're on the live action stuff. Because I know Loki's going to get a series, I think.
Yeah.
And I believe Tom Hiddleston's actually lined up as well, that's quite a boon, isn't it?
I think they filmed some of it. Yeah, I think it's in production. Yeah, definitely. And the one that looks really intriguing actually is WandaVision, the Scarlet Witch
yes,
TV show.
Actually, isn't it Olsen that's playing her as well?
Mm-hmm. It's all because
that's big.
Because they're now in charge. They basically binned. Kevin Feige is now Mr. Marvel. He's in charge of the comics, technically, as well. He's like chief creative officer. And they're now taking control of the TV arm to stop, Inhumans happening again, essentially. They cancelled Runaways, and they cancelled, I think, Cloak and Dagger and some of the other ones that were with various other Hulus and Stars and all this kind of stuff. And they're now integrating it. And I heard talk that there's a fourth series that they've not announced yet that is going to potentially lead into Captain Marvel 2 and some part of whatever the next phase is going to be, which I think there's been whisperings of it being some sort of Skrull, possibly Secret Invasion, possibly some element of that, which they tried to do with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. when the movie was in the early days.
I quite liked that. A lot of people didn't.
Yeah, I liked it because it was just like the comics.
And in between seasons, it would show the fallout from the last film. I thought it was quite cool.
It was just too one-handed. It was basically the TV trying to stay involved.
Yeah.
But then when you read in the behind the scenes, Ike Perlmutter, he's the chairman, basically owner of Marvel. He just, he didn't want to spend the money on the movies. And they were making money and really popular, but he was still in charge of the purse strings initially.
Yeah.
So that I think a lot of what they did, they managed to do on the cheap. And they were lucky they got it done, really.
I think we mentioned before, haven't we, that I think we both had a personal dislike for Inhumans TV series. Well, what was the other one you just mentioned as well?
Cloak and Dagger, Runaways.
Cloak and Dagger, but Runaways, I started that. That's awful as well for different reasons.
I didn't see it, but I did notice. I think that's on Disney Plus.
So the next contender is post-apocalypse as a genre. And this does feel like a bit of a specialist subject for me. And I've done so many podcasts about post-apocalypse, this, that, and the other. I suppose, similar to what you were saying before, unlike others, there wasn't an original 1930s or 40s post-apocalypse genre to build from for a true history. So it's kind of hard to format it like that. In literature terms, things like Mary Shelley's The Last Man or H.G. Wells' The Time Machine are actually post-apocalyptic novels.
Dystopian.
Growing up, I mean, this is all about me growing up, really, this section. It has to be. Because there were so many books in our house. And in the 60s and the 50s, you know, you had Arthur C. Clarke did lots of post-apocalyptic sort of sci-fi stuff. We had a lot of John Wyndham stuff, Day of the Triffids, Kraken Awakes, the Chrysalids, all those kind of... It starts with what caused the apocalypse and then goes to the post bit. So again, not true pure post-apocalypse, but all those things kind of were in the house. And as a genre, it covers really a whole gamut of reasons. Is it war? Is it an environmental apocalypse? Is it an alien invasion? A robotic AI awakening? There's astronomical ones. Something's hit the Earth and knocked out electricity, or probably won't dwell on the pandemic side of things right now. And of course, there is zombie apocalypse as well, which we've kept that as a separate genre in this World Cup, so I won't be mentioning zombie apocalypse. But
because that's another specialist subject.
It is specialist. It is. Okay. But for me, I mean, I grew up in the middle of Cold War paranoia. There was the real prospect of World War III. You got inundated with it. And as a kid, you probably absorbed more than you should have. And I probably took it more seriously than actually like adults did. And it, as a kid growing up, it just really, it kind of defined me a little bit, I think, with my rather jaded worldview, I think. I mean, we had Threads on TV, which no way should I have watched that, but I did. My parents didn't know. But again, it was years and years later, but America had the day after, which was a similar kind of thing. But I think Threads is the more scary. My school library had When the Wind Blows. I think I was the only person to have actually read it, because it was always pristine, but I kept going back to it. It really, well, I mean, that's my love of comics as well, I guess. But my worldview was dictated by 2000 AD. Okay, we had Helltrekkers, we had Strontium Dog, we had almost every single Future Shock story was post-apocalypse of some sort. My father had one of the first, well, it was the first video shop in North Wales, actually. And this was a time when you had to hire the video machine to go with it.
Right.
Well,
yes.
I was the envy of all my friends because I had my own, and I have to say this, wooden video recorder in my own room. In fact, I had two because I did tape recording. But I had my own copy of Mad Max. Okay. Oh, yeah. And Mad Max and Mad Max 2 just defined the era for me. But
yeah, totally.
And me and a really good friend of mine, Derek, we were absolutely, these are trash books, absolute the worst, trashiest books ever. But Jerry Ahern's The Survivalist series is an ex-CIA guy who's got quite, if I go back and reread them, his love of firearms and the technical sort of aspects of firearms is almost sexual. It's a bit weird, but he survives a plane crash that goes down because of the EMP sort of burst from World War III. And it's like the Sharp novels. Do you know, like Sharp is basically getting off with women and killing his way through Europe. All right. I can't even remember the antagonist's name now. It's basically the same thing, but in a World War III scenario, and he makes his way to get to his wife across America and defeats Nazis for some reason, research. But they were absolutely trash.
We know why now.
But this is the stuff that was just like hitting us daily sort of thing, and all very strange. But I mean, Judge Dredd as well. It's like, you know, the whole thing's post-apocalypse. 2000 AD was was such a sort of like constant thing in the background of everything we talked about or did as kids. A neighbour also knew that I liked comics as well. And going back to you mentioning about the Peruvian artists that did newspaper cartoons.
Yeah.
I only remembered this when I was kind of like jotting down notes. And my neighbour used to come over and he'd have him and his wife would have a cup of coffee with mum and dad, but leave strips from The Sun. And it was a strip called AXA.
Oh,
and it's basically Red Sonja.
Yeah.
A post-apocalyptic setting. And on an almost daily basis would lose her clothes.
Yeah.
She was mostly topless during this. I was way too young to be given this. But it was that was awful. I had to look up who the artist was, actually. Enrique Bardia Romero, who's, he did mainstream comics and stuff at the time. But and it didn't probably help that probably my first, what I would call girlfriend, we're talking very young here, just happened to be the daughter of the CND organisers for our area. So it was just background noise that just built up, and it's kind of always led to a kind of a fascination that something could happen. And probably this is the worst topic to be talking about right now, because people are making so many comparisons to post-apocalyptic scenarios. It's unbelievable. But what I've done is I've kind of thought about all the different things that I've read over the years that I absolutely loved. And I kind of put them in a chronological order, even though I maybe not read them in that order. But hopefully it's things to look up. And there's all different reasons for each of them why they're post-apocalyptic and why they hit the right buttons for me. And weirdly enough, the first one is all about post-apocalyptic fun.
I know you're going to say.
88. Another obsession of mine is, of course, Tank Girl. Jamie Hewlett and Alan Martin. The original stuff is still always the best. I still read Tank Girl, but I'm sorry, but the original Deadline series is still the best. It brings us to post-apocalyptic Australia, and it was everything I was about at the time, I guess. My sister had gone off to uni, so I kind of visited her, and I've told this story before, but it was a chance find in a comic shop. And the whole of Deadline really had a very punk fanzine look to it, just the lettering and all that kind of stuff. And then Tank Girl just blew my mind. And I've always read comics, but I think Deadline itself made me turn a corner, I think, to just love anything outside of Marvel and DC again. Yeah. But it's such an irreverent, mad storyline. I say storyline. I think they admitted they ran out of storyline quite soon on, and that wasn't the point of Tank Girl.
It's like a sketch show, really, wasn't it? Or it was a series of sort of encounters, even down to you'd have slight sort of different comic asides, wouldn't you? And you'd have people appearing and just jokes. It seemed more.
It was just anything as an excuse to get in a bit of anarchic action in, really. Yeah. I mean,
it was
the oddest things that just fascinate. Grenade baseball fascinated me as a concept. And when I used to, in my early 20s, I had a group of friends and we just went surfing to Abbotsford, and I introduced a form of grenade baseball into it, right? Which was basically a baseball bat, and we were taking huge embers out of the campfire. And I happened to have an oversized rig peg, which you could actually scoop it up and serve to somebody, and you just baseball bat this ember, and it would just be an explosion. And it's just little things like that just caught my imagination with Tank Girl, and yeah, it's been a big part of my life as Tank Girl. About 1990, Chuck Dixon's Winterworld came out, and this is the most purest form of post-apocalypse. I've done a podcast bit on it before, so I won't go too much in, but it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a winter world. It's Mad Max in snow. It's about a couple of normal survivors, Scully, Wynn, and their pet Rara, who is they're trying to survive in this frozen wasteland. They've got like not an Amtrak, what's the word for it? One of those snow buggy things, how they start off with. And they're basically coming across the remnants of human society in a Mad Max style. They've gone feral. It's all about food. There's the greatest danger is meeting another person. Right. And then you've got to survive and find food in ever-depleted resources. And it's quite sort of claustrophobic, but at times. But there's a really nice overarching storyline to it. They do meet survivor camps. It's very much Walking Dead with no zombies.
Right. Yes.
And a lot of snow.
Cool. And it's still being published, is it?
No, I'm not sure if it is anymore. They kind of did reboots at different periods. There's the original 1990. There's the second volume. Then there's Winterworld Mechanic's Song, is it? And then there's nothing after that. It's something you need to collect. I think if you look, I think you'll only find about 3 or 4 books, and one of them's hard to get hold of, is the original.
I just Googled it, and it came up with one called Winterworld Better Angels, Colder Hearts from 2016. But
I've not read that.
Yeah, well, it's got Butch Guice on the art, but I love Butch Guice. And Tommy Lee Edwards. So you might be getting a bit of a lockdown treat there, Mike.
Just looking for it myself now.
But Butch Guice, he did. What's he worked? He worked on Micronauts and Winter Soldier. The first solo Winter Soldier with Ed Brubaker, drawn by Butch Guice. Oh, man alive. He's so cool. Yeah, sounds really good. I'm going to have to look this up myself.
Yeah, because
it's kind of the best bit of, well, one of the great bits.
Wow. No, I have not seen this. It's IDW. Oh, wow. Awesome find. The older stuff is something you go back to. Start with Volume 1, La Nina.
Right.
That's the way to do it.
So who's drawing it back then?
I'm trying to think now. Yeah, it's Butch Guice doing on La Nina, but he didn't do the original, I don't think. I'm just trying to look that up now.
Oh, this sounds good.
Hang on. Georges Zaffino.
Oh, right.
I actually made the note, and I didn't read to the end of the sentence. Yeah, I think start with one that's Volume 1, La Nina, and then Stranded, and then they did Mechanic's Song as well, which I've only got. I only got that recently because it was really hard to get hold of for some reason. I'm looking on IDW now, and it says out of stock. Why? That's absolutely awesome. Right, that's going on my Amazon list right now. Okay. See, it's really useful doing these things. 91, Car Warriors. This is a really weird one because Car Warriors was a tabletop game based on Mad Max, basically ripped off the idea. But then they made a comic of Car Warriors, and I've got all 4. I think it was 4. And I really liked it because I was playing the game at the time. And it was one of those things you found in game shops. It was like a little tin, almost. It was a Steve Jackson game, and a lot of them, like Illuminati and stuff, were in a little plastic tin-shaped thing. And it was cardboard counters, and basically you were playing out Mad Max.
Yeah.
But the comic really added a lot to the sort of background story to it. And Car Warriors is kind of still going. Sorry, Steve Jackson was Car Wars, wasn't it? Car Warriors was another similar rip-off game. It was a nice little sort of Mad Maxy style comic. Why The Last Man started in 2002. I did read it a lot later than that, though, actually. And that's covering the death of all Y chromosome mammals. Again, I've already done a podcast all about this. It's Yorick Brown and his little capuchin monkey, Ampersand, which is my favourite pet name ever. If I ever get a capuchin monkey, that's what it'll be called. But I might name it my next pet, whatever it is. And again, that's a really sprawling story. He's perceived. They think he's the only man alive, and obviously with a species that about to die. It's kind of trying to find himself in the right place whilst being hunted by every mad scientist, left, right, and centre. It's a damn fine series. 2006 was Wasteland. That was Anthony Johnston. That was a 60 issue. And oh god, I always forget to look up artists because I'm crap on name. Christopher Mitten, I think.
Oh yeah, he's done some BPRD, yeah.
And that's all about. Okay, this is quite hard to talk about really without spoilers and stuff. The main antagonist was Michael, and he's kind of like this just drifter who doesn't really know who he is himself or where he comes from, and he does have some strange gifts, and I think that's where it starts off. In fact, is when he comes across the town for the first time. Again, it's set in a desert bowl of a world which is after 100 years previously. There was an event called the Big Wet, which was like mass flooding and all, an ecological disaster. It's again one of these that kind of it really explores the breakdown of society. And there's a lot of sort of like the balance between religion, politics, and just plain survival, and how those blend, and how people easily gather around something, be it a charismatic person or a religion, or not only in order to survive, but also to almost excuse their own behaviour somewhat. 2008, another one I've already covered in a podcast, and this is just a list of things I've done that one. It was a webcomic originally. Have you ever read Freak Angels?
No, no. I've looked it up a couple of times, but not in because that was Warren Ellis's webcomic, wasn't it? Yeah.
I started reading it, suddenly twigged something, and then I went back to read the Midwich Cuckoos.
Oh yeah.
Suddenly realised it. Every time I look this up now, it's actually stated that this is what it is, but it's basically the Midwich Cuckoos grown up in a post-apocalypse setting.
Right.
And I don't know why that wasn't obvious, and then it suddenly was. So I went back and read it just to, because I haven't read that since I was a kid. Basically, it's about 12 psychics who are living around sort of the Whitechapel area, and it's kind of a post-flood Britain, and it's all about the rebuilding society and them trying to figure out whether or not they were to blame for something as well. But it's very cleverly done. It's been collected. I actually read a little bit of it as a webcomic series, and then they collected it, so I kind of caught up a bit that way. I've got a horrible feeling I hadn't finished it, but 2012, The Infinite Horizon. This is just basically a modern take on Homer's The Odyssey, but just pure post-apocalyptic.
Right.
It's got clever ways like, yes, there is a Cyclops in it, but I'm not going to spoil that out. It is pure post-apocalypse. And it's kind of starting from soldier surviving from a Middle Eastern conflict onwards. 2012, The Massive. This is Brian Wood. This is truly epic, and I've got halfway through, I think. It's kind of, it starts with a small crew, a captain and his crew, on like an eco trawler called Capital, and who's basically trying to survive the apocalypse at sea, and it's an epic journey through the world. And I love this because it's post everything. There's been war, ecological disaster, economic disaster. It's kind of like everything got buggered all at once. And it's just how, it's really quite cool how it does the journey. One, again, 2014, but I actually only did recently come across this. Girl's Last Tour, which is just an eerie manga about two young girls, Chito and Yuri. Well, they're in a city. It starts off, they're in like an abandoned warehouse. It's one of these where it doesn't give you a lot of background. It's all about what's happening here now and how they go forward. And it is very eerie, the artwork. And it's just their struggle to survive. It's a huge destroyed city. It doesn't really explain why. They are scrabbling around for food. Meeting people is dangerous. It's very low key, but mesmerizing. It's not as depressing if you've ever read The Road, Cormac McCarthy's The Road, or seen the film, which I love, but God, you have to be in the right mood for that. There's post-apocalypse, but yeah, you can get some depressing post-apocalypse. I realise that. Again, 2015, the Mad Max Fury Road tie-in comics are above and beyond tie-in comics, what you would normally think of them. It really does add. You've got it gives you the background to so many characters. Nux gets in an episode, and it doesn't just complement, it makes the film a better thing to see. And the great thing was, all of this it was all written by Miller himself, and it was supposed to be, he was half between what to film and what to leave as a comic. He wanted to do something with comics, but any of this could have just as easily been a film as well. That is probably the highlights of what I would call pure post-apocalypse. There is a couple of others. There's Savage Highway by which has been translated now by Humanoids. There's a little controversy about it, but that's a very straightforward post-apocalypse, disintegration of society, a young woman travelling with a man for protection, but that's not always the case, unfortunately. And it's grim, but it's more on the animalistic side of, you're in a situation now where the more powerful wins. And a lot of the issues are, the same things that you come across in things like The Walking Dead. And again, classic post-apocalypse, but I will be leaving that obviously for the zombie special at some point. Yes. And those are probably the key ones in the purest sense. There's post-apocalypse, again, absolutely massive genre when you start thinking about like mixing it with more sci-fi, this, that, and the other. But I've got some, probably my favourite, absolute post-apocalypse must-haves for the penalty shootouts. If you're ready for the penalty shootouts.
Penalty shootout. I think. Are you going first? Does it matter? Doesn't really matter, but.
I'll try first. Pride of Baghdad. In the aftermath of the 2003 US bombing, 4 escaped lions roam the ruins of Baghdad. This could have easily fitted into your category.
It was non-fiction. I've got that on the shelf as well.
Yeah. It's a true story. 4 lions did Obviously, what happens is fictionalized.
It didn't talk. This seems ridiculous. The Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes, the closest thing there's been to an animated Marvel Universe cartoon. Excelsior. Well, I'm giving that to the comic.
We're gonna. So that's yeah. I think I'm gonna vote that way as well. Actually, it's a weird little indie, isn't it? That Pride of Baghdad.
Yeah, it's Brian K. Vaughan, isn't it? And I can't remember the artist, but there's it was one of those that everybody was talking about in the shop, which it was a very unusual title to get that jump, but it did, and it is. It's really intriguing.
Cool idea on that one. Penalty 2 for you.
The Umbrella Academy. A messed up adopted family of super weirdos try and fail to get along. The crazy is amped up in the comics.
And I've gone with what I mentioned before, Wasteland. Post the big wet in a great desert dust bowl. A man struggles against fellow man and mutated wildlife. I'm going to vote for Umbrella Academy. That was just a favourite in our house. It has to be. Number 3, Mad Max Fury Road. The origins of Nux, Immortan Joe, Furiosa, and the Bullet Farmer.
I'm not okay with this. Teen angst and school problems with a superpowered twist.
I'm not sure what to say, actually, because we haven't watched it yet. No, it's on our to-view list.
And I haven't read the Fury Road one, so I love the movie, but I haven't read that one. So that's a draw.
It's two things we're both interested in, so we'll put that down as a draw.
Yeah.
I've lost count as to who's who. Is it me first?
It's the third, fourth. So you went, me went. It's me. End of the effing world. Very, very dark comedy. Very, very smartly told. Difficult to like characters quickly become compelling.
Le Transpersonnage. The last of the frozen Earth's humanity clash aboard a never-ending global train. Snowpiercer is what you'd probably know it as.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, it sounds like Snowpiercer.
It is, which is coming to Netflix.
Yeah, and it sounds like a TV show.
Yeah, I mean, the film was on Netflix as well.
Yes,
we watched it. Taking it off again, I think. I need to see if it's back on.
Yeah, it's a shame because, given the problems that you mentioned about it, it's understanding, really why it doesn't quite work, I don't think, on the movie level.
It's going to be an amazing series if they put off, but again, I haven't heard any recent news. And then I'm torn on this one because I like both.
Yeah, but I think we're going to have to give it to the comic.
Yeah. Okay, doke.
I think really, this is where my brilliant idea of talking about TV shows messes up because I'm.
Well, hang on, I've completely misunderstood what you meant. The comic is the Transpersonnage, isn't it? Yeah. All right, okay. It's comic against TV, isn't it?
It is really comic versus TV, which in this sense doesn't really stand up being a comic podcast and all.
Okay, Dirty Trick time. For the fifth penalty shootout, Judge Dredd, keeping law in a mega city of the radioactive wasteland that is 22nd century Earth. Feels a bit cheaty, but...
Is this Judge Dredd or Dredd? Oh, no, you're talking about comics.
Yes.
I'm still in TV mode.
No, I was going to say you're
okay.
in TV mode.
Judge Dredd versus Lock and Key. Great start, intriguing premise, smartly told. Sent me straight to read the books. Yeah, it's got to be Judge Dredd. So it's a win for Post-Apocalypse.
It is. I've got so much fondness for Lock and Key, but yeah, Judge Dredd is Judge Dredd.
Big, isn't it? It's like, and it really does sum up, like you say, that was a prime start and one of your first instances of proper future potential. And I still mention to the girls now how much Judge Dredd got right about the future. Just weird little curveballs and little inside thoughts from outside of minds to a certain extent about what might happen if suddenly somebody like Otto Sump get ugly. You know, there's lots of people today that would argue what a lot of people like to look like is ugly. The people, the massively migration from housing to, you know, the tower blocks.
Yeah.
People living on freeways and in cars. I mean, people living in cars, that's been a thing for a while, you know, people living in their car. Probably not that long after Judge Dredd came out, really.
And if you want to, you know, just to bring it into modern relevance, I mean, you're talking about the megacities are just huge isolationist settlements with huge walls.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about building walls nowadays.
Yeah.
And then outside is just the wasteland. It's a post-apocalyptic wasteland, but they are not classed as citizens even. It's just the politics as well is quite funny in a modern context when you've got the different megacities around the world and how they act towards each other. Funnily enough, last week I actually read Block War, that obviously follows into the Apocalypse War. This was just, by the way, coincidental reading. Well, I'll tell you what, Block War made me howl with laughter because, of course, you've got every block. They're always named after a personality, aren't they? Mm. And sometimes it makes you laugh because, like, you'd forgotten that person existed. And then other times they are so relevant right now. And there's no way they could have known why they're relevant right now. It's really funny. It's worth just having a quick read through.
Really?
It's worth it just for the names.
Oh, God.
There's there was a joke about Martha Stewart block as well, which made me laugh. I can't remember what it was now, but it's like, oh, if only you knew.
Yeah, totally.
Oh,
right.
That was close. The problem is, it's a post-apocalypse win, but everything you had on TV was just fantastic. But we feel like we have to be snobs with comics more.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, by putting things forward, I think that was, and I think it's a confusing category when the mediums are sort of so closely sort of entwined somewhat.
Yeah. And
it's good to put some stuff out there because it is, you know, easily watched, you know, on Channel 4 and Netflix. But I think it's going to make things easier going forward with a clear mind about the medium that we're discussing, really. So I think that's where when choosing to talk about TV shows and a comic genre match might have backfired. I should have talked about the man from Atlantis after all.
It must have been a previous Mutterdown because I definitely mentioned Ghost World at some point.
Yeah, that was.
And I was going down my Amazon list, and it must have been from the last time I talked about that. It reminded me that I didn't have a copy of the original comic book, and then I realised I hadn't actually got it. I must have had it on VHS. Right. So I'm now looking for a decent DVD copy, which again isn't actually straightforward. You can buy ones for like 99p or whatever, but you know they're old and I was hoping for like a remastered version or something like that. So
Criterion or something. Yeah,
I want to watch. I want to watch it and I want to read it again.
Yeah, Nancy's got it. but we haven't rewatched it ourselves yet.
It's been a while.
Right, well, so, I'm afraid the natives are getting restless here. I don't know, but we've had... I don't know what Mike's picking up, quite frankly, but we've got somebody in the shower at the moment. And
No, it's all right.
Hopefully it's not being picked up, but obviously they can only stop their life for so long while we yak about comics, but it's all going to kick off, I know. I can feel it. Get this general vibe.
Oh, I'll be giving a quick spoiler as to what the comic categories are for the next
Group C. I don't think we did Group C, do we?
No, we didn't.
We're going to have to do Group C and Group D, because I think we only did the first 8.
Yes, we did. Okay. Shall I read out the list of genres?
Go for it.
We've already mentioned we have zombie, we have war, we have adult, we have drama, we have comedy, we have sci-fi, we have fantasy, and of course superhero.
Do you know, I think we did divvy them up, but I don't know who had what.
But we didn't actually agree which 4 would...
No, we didn't do the verses, but we did draw for who got what. Yeah. Because I seem to remember, I think I got drama.
Oh, I can tell you. You will be championing superhero, sci-fi, adult, and drama.
Adult. Woohoo! Yeah, I just want to break out my shaking books. Okay, so yeah, we'll have to. So we'll do a draw for those next time then. Brilliant.
Right.
Well,
to everyone that made it this far.
Yeah, thanks as always to those people who've managed to survive yet another lockdown Mutterdowns. We need to get some sort of medal made. We keep threatening them, but believe me, you deserve one if you got this far. Well, please, yes, join us again when we yak about more comics in 2 weeks' time. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ThisManThisPete.
And I'm on Twitter as @CthulhuPunk. Till next time.
Cheers.
Hi, I'm Nikki. If you like watercolour art, moving comics with relatable characters, then please check out my website, watercolourbynicole.com. We also have some very cute pin badges on there and take art commissions. Thank you.
And we're here to close the show.
Yes.
Right. I want to just say, this is hard, this is.
Oh, don't cry. Do you need a tissue?
When we were talking about Bluebeard, I went off on my one of usual reviews. And Nikki felt I went a bit too far in the story.
Yes, you gave too much away.
So I had to edit out a bit and then redo it.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't think, I couldn't do it. I couldn't, my mind just went.
Yeah.
And it doesn't do that normally.
No. It's this situation that everyone's finding themselves in, and everyone's brain's going a little bit.
Really, I'm
Yeah.
struggling a bit. Not normally. Just I don't know. Whenever something comes, you come up against something that normally you'd be like, well, sod it, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It affects a bit more. It's weird.
Like I say, it is the mental. Well, like I say, we're on the edge of a mental health epidemic, and even the most stony people are finding it affects them, and it's going to affect people at different times in different ways. And the thing to realise, try and be a Zen chicken, and if you can't be a Zen chicken, then it's everything you're feeling is normal, and we will get through this, but you've got to just accept.
Unless you're feeling the Zen chicken, leave the chicken alone.
If you're managing to reach the heights of Zen chicken, then you're fine. But we all try and achieve the Zen chicken, but sometimes with the headless one. So it's all okay though. All of these feelings are fine.
If you're on your own, reach out to someone and talk to somebody.
Oh yeah, just anyone, because it will send you crazy.
On your own. We've got imagine this if it was 15 years ago, you wouldn't have Skype or any of those other Zoom, as we found out.
Yes, what is this Zoom thing? We're so old, aren't we? We'd had our first Zoom meeting. I was really worried just to move or make any noise in agreement in case the camera flicked back to me. Oh, nuts, it's my face again.
Skype does that as well, do you?
Oh, but does it flick like that?
Sure it does.
Oh, God. It just seemed very like, you.
So, yeah, chat to people any means
do.
you can. Get involved if your head's in the game. Do some art, do some writing, do whatever. Something that'll feel like you're doing something worthwhile.
Yeah, but don't worry if you can't do that. You know, sometimes it's the little things like having a nice hot bath with a bubble bath if you can get hold of some.
Making a cake.
No
one can make it as good as me.
Oh, God. But, you know, things like that. Grow some cress, anything. I was just trying to think of something really simple.
You were going to say grow some balls. But that's not the message we're trying to put across here.
Just find pleasure in the little things. Put your favourite music on.
Clean under the stairs.
We did that. That was like day one, wasn't it? You know, just the little things that bring a little smile to your face and just let you know that you have control of something.
Mm-hmm.
Then it will help you through the rest of it. But yeah, definitely get in touch. Obviously, we're around.
I was going to say, you know what? DM us on
DM
Twitter.
us. Or chat us on Twitter. I don't care.
Yeah, we'll do it if you want to be private. We'll accept any DMs.
Yeah.
And
well...
Those type of pictures are not required.
But yeah, you know, we're all
Tony
here.
Everyone's we don't
here.
want those pictures.
Again.
Yeah, no, it's odd. And if you're really struggling, do reach out. We'll have a Zoom chat with you.
How about you put all the helplines on the bottom?
Well, there's probably a link. I can put a link to a page that's got all the
to
helplines.
Mind or something on there that will just have the stuff so you can, and you know, we've all been at those low points, and I found the Samaritans very helpful when I had to contact someone, and but there is always someone there that will chat. And
if you are financially struggling for entertainment and so forth, Comic House is free for a month.
Mm-hmm.
So there's comics there for
a
month and 12 days.
Safe,
Stay Safe was the last time.
So the code, but it might be different. But check on their website.
There's loads of free. Comic Scene has got the list of free paid comics there, but certainly Comic House is too much there for.
Yeah, and a lot of creators are giving out free colouring pages and things. You might have to search a little bit for that.
YouTube videos are plenty.
Oh gosh, yeah.
There's loads of free stuff.
Yeah.
For the anyone who's really short on pennies, because we are going to be at some point. Everybody, I think we're forlonged.
Yeah, you're forlonged. I'm working away. But I'm not the main breadwinner, so yeah, we'll get there. We'll just tighten our belts. I won't have so much Jack Daniels. It'll be fine.
How's that working out?
Yeah, it's not.
Right.
Let's be honest, alcohol's getting us all through this.
I'm hoping future episode we're going to do I'm not told anyone else, Mike or Peter, anyone this, a Warhammer special episode. Mike will be well into that.
Did you tell me this?
I did mention it. Yes,
oh, did I just blank it out?
So Richard Chief, who gave us the comments, is going to come on
lovely.
And talk about the artwork in particular, because that's what he's been focusing on, the covers and so forth.
Yeah.
But I want to get a creator that's well known for doing work within these comics. There's a few names. I'm struggling at the minute.
You're struggling with everything, aren't you, at the minute?
I've had an idea, though.
Oh, God, he's had a cunning
plan.
But
we'll see if it comes together.
It's like having Baldrick in the house, it really is.
And can I also say, if you are a Kendall-based listener, keep hold of your rainbows.
Yes. We'll tell you
South
more.
Lakes. There's something going on that we're involved with, which we could talk about it, but I think we'll wait until the official press release has come out.
Yeah.
And then we'll let you know, which should be by next episode.
Hopefully.
We'll let you know what we've got ourselves into.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. That's the last time I have an idea.
But yeah, we'll discuss that next episode, because there may be ways of other people getting involved. We're not sure yet, so it'll be really interesting. But so stay safe.
Stay safe. Stay smiling.
Yeah.
We're going to get through this.
And if you want to see pictures of me in a tutu, I'll happily send them to make you smile every day of the week.
Put them on main Twitter.
Thank you very much for listening. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Find out more about the festival at comicartfestival.com. Find out more about the show and how to contact us at comicartpodcast.uk. Find us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Music composed by Pop Noir.
Down for yourself. This podcast is part of Britpod Scene, an independent network of uniquely British podcasts that's always growing. Check out BritpodScene.com or BritpodScene on Twitter to find out more.